a really consequential moment today. The Supreme Court finding that he should still be on the ballot, will still be on the ballot, has not been disqualified. And again, they found the exit ramp that many thought they were looking for. It was apparent.
Yeah, absolutely, Laura and Paula, and they're doing this on the eve of Super Tuesday, which makes sense, and I guess it gives us some sense that the Supreme Court is looking at the political calendar, not just the legal calendar. All right, Laura and Paula, thank you. Let me go. Joan Biskupic is on set with us, as well as Dana Bash and Ellie Honig. Joan, your sense of this?
Well, first of all, it's 9-0 to reverse the Colorado Supreme Court. So former President Donald Trump will remain on the ballot and other state ballots. But the justice is actually split on how far to go. The majority decision, written as a per curiam, likely by the Chief Justice of the United States because it's unsigned, gives much more authority to Congress about when someone should be disqualified. And Justices Barrett, and then the three liberals write separately. And what's key here is justices. I'm listening to two different things. Excuse me for a second.
It happens.
I was listening to two different conversations, but I'll listen to ours first.
Please.
Okay, this is the important part, that even though they came out and gave us something unanimous that's very useful in the political scheme, especially for tomorrow, for Super Tuesday, it shows how divided the Supreme Court still is, because the three liberals broke off and said, you majority are going too far in terms of how you would dictate the rules for future disqualifications. And again, it was the three liberals specifically writing on this: Justice Sotomayor, Sonia Sotomayor, Elena Kagan, and our newest Justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Now, Justice Barrett, one of Donald Trump's appointees, the third one, in fact, split off a bit also, but not joining the liberals.
Interesting. And Ellie, I just want to read, it looks like page 13 of this. It says, for the reasons given, responsibility for enforcing Section 3 against federal office holders and candidates rests with Congress and not the states.
Right.
The judgment of the Colorado Supreme Court therefore cannot stand. So they're saying essentially that Congress has to make this decision whether there are insurrectionists who need to be kept off of ballots. Is that essentially what they're saying?
Essentially what they're saying is it's up to Congress to tell us.
Welcome to a Monday edition of Straight Outta Politics. I'm your host for today. I'm CJ, or Jay in real life. I'm always kind of paranoid about my sound, so I just checked that it should be fine. Welcome. This is a doozy. This stream will be a doozy. I'm going to try to jam pack a ton of information into, I want to make sure I keep it at 2.5 hours. So there's a lot. And then this drops on my lap right before the stream starts. So I just briefly wanted to kind of cover this. This is not going to be a long segment on this, but this is breaking within the last maybe 3 hours, a little bit less than 3 hours. Supreme Court coming out ruling that Donald Trump cannot be kept off of any state ballot. The ruling came through a case brought by the Colorado state, but the ruling applies to all 50 states. And you can hear the sort of disappointment of a Hail Mary. You ever watch football? Now, if you don't watch football, you may not get this analogy, but you're watching football. It's your team. They're down, few seconds left. You know it's going to be a Hail Mary. The defense knows it's going to be a Hail Mary. And you're hoping. You're at home. You're biting your nails. And the ball goes up. All your hopes is in that ball, and it falls to the ground. And that feeling you get once that Hail Mary hits the ground and you see the clock is at double zeros, that's the feeling that all of the news outlets on the liberal side are giving about this ruling, which is now at the same time they say, they admit this was a Hail Mary. They admit that this was a long shot. But, no matter the long shot, no matter the Hail Mary, the people who want that side that's using the Hail Mary to win put all their hopes in it. And when it falls through, they look and sound like this. Let's listen to a little bit more of this, and then we'll get to the regular scheduled show.
How this works. So if Congress had, let's say 50 years ago, Congress had passed a law saying we're going to let the states do it so long as they abide by due process, then what Colorado did would have been fine. But Congress has done essentially nothing in the 150 years since the 14th Amendment was ratified in 1868. Now, I want to make sure people understand this. It's a very important feature of this decision. There is no substantive discussion in here by the Supreme Court of whether Donald Trump did or did not engage in insurrection.
Interesting.
There is no conversation about what the meaning of his words at the rally were or what happened inside the Capitol.
You notice
any of Donald Trump's
every time they have a ruling, they do this with the Fannie Willis case down in Atlanta too. Every time there's good news for Donald Trump, they always make it a point to tell the audience this in no way bears on the propaganda piece we've been pushing for several years. That's essentially what they're saying. Hey, audience, this in no way diminishes our propaganda campaign around January 6th all these years, okay? So don't make the connection. They make it a point to do that, just like he does here, and it's always ironic and curious to me.
Trump's actions. That's not what the Supreme Court has done here. That's not what the Supreme Court typically does. This is a procedural, legalistic decision. And essentially, if I had to boil it down to one sentence, it would be it's up to Congress, not the individual
They didn't
states.
want a big messy
Oh, who knew that?
situation where all
Who
the
could have
states
guessed
go here
that?
and there and that sort of thing.
The word I circled in this decision is, quote, patchwork. They said, we don't want a patchwork where one state's doing one thing and another state's doing another.
But you know Donald Trump better than most, covered him for many
A little,
years,
yeah.
many years.
Oh, yeah,
as
that means
as a
you know him.
reporter covering him as a politician.
Oops.
And as
there we go.
figure who takes things and will turn them the way that he wants America and the world to see them.
Turn them the way.
I will be
Instead
shocked
of just saying, given his
if
point of
Donald
view,
Trump doesn't,
and
as
people
soon as he
believe.
can, get out there and argue not only that the Supreme Court is behind him, but
We're
he's probably
so
going to argue,
intellectually weak.
even though there's
Yeah.
nothing in here that specifically says, as Ellie so importantly pointed out, anything about what happened on January 6th. It's just procedural about whether the states or Congress have a right. He will claim victory, and I'm guessing he will do it.
So they're already preemptively trying to play defense because they're saying that he's gonna say that somehow this is a blow towards their case of January 6th, and they want to make it say, yeah, that that's coming, and it's not true. It is such a they are so protective of certain things. Russiagate is another one. But this January 6th is one where no, they're very protective of this, this charade called January 6th and the prosecution of it. But let's continue.
In a more broad way than this decision actually says.
Yeah, and Joan, I mean, there are countless Americans out there who believe that the Supreme Court just bailed out Donald Trump here, and that they're going to bail him. They might bail him out again on the immunity issue, which I know a lot of folks feel like that's not going to happen. But the fact that can got kicked down the road means that the January 6th trial may not happen in federal court.
And
so
what you're referring to there is the fact that the justices have scheduled.
I don't understand how in the way that they talk, how can they say this is not political persecution? In the hunger that's in their tone about getting to a case that they can put him in jail for because they can't beat him in the polls. I mean, just recently they've been Morning Joe. We're going to cover it. Morning Joe bringing up a poll where, man, he's down 4 points in a brand new poll. Like, even their latest propaganda is falling short. Is not convincing anybody. I'll give this a few more minutes, see if they make a couple of good points here.
Scheduled an oral argument for the week of April 22nd on whether Donald Trump should be immune from criminal prosecution for election subversion. But let me just tell you what concerned the three liberals about this ruling and how far the majority went.
Oh, yeah, we want to know
just
that.
reading it now,
Even though it's 9-0 still.
their concern was that the majority went further than they needed for this particular case and essentially is over favoring Donald Trump. Ultimately, under the guise of providing a more, quote, complete explanation for the judgment, the majority resolves many unsettled questions about Section 3, that's Section 3 of the 14th Amendment, the anti-insurrectionist ban. It forecloses judicial enforcement of that provision, such as might occur when a party is prosecuted by an insurrectionist and raises defense on that score. I mean, the language hints of what's happening with Donald Trump right now. So I think that's their concern, is that the fuller majority has gone further. Now, this is a concurrence, just so you know. So the all 9 have signed on to the basic principle, reversing the Colorado Supreme Court and keeping him on the ballot.
Which is all that matters, is reversing it. So there you go, folks. I know you're not here for that particular story, so I wanted to keep it short. But the bottom line is the Supreme Court rules against Colorado, and the ruling from the Colorado Supreme Court, it's ruling against this court, the Colorado state, I'm sorry, also applies to any other state that is bringing, in the process of bringing, or have already adjudicated, like Illinois has adjudicated recently that they're going to take them off the ballot. No, you're not. So this case affects all of those cases, and that nonsense is over. I mean, you don't have to really go to law school if you understand sort of the basic concepts of American, the United States governmental structure that we all learn in, elementary school and middle school. Is that what they call it now? Or junior high? Which is a basic concept that a constitutional provision that disallows somebody to come to be taken off, or to not take office. It doesn't even say off a ballot, it say not to be taken office. So presumably you can read into that to mean he can go through the election and be elected, but they cannot be sworn in. So, and that would be another constitutional issue. But who thought that a state court can apply a federal guideline? Nobody thought that. Like, that's ridiculous. It's the same reason along the border, when any state borders a foreign country, there's not supposed to be state employees there. There's supposed to be federal employees on that borderline, and state employees will cover every other border of a state. But anyway, I digress. Let's move on. Didn't want to spend too much time with that. You can put your thoughts up. Let me see if anybody have any interesting thoughts about this story. I'll toss up before we move on here, but we don't want to stay on this. So let me read this one from Dr. Nick Riviera. SCOTUS gets their power from following the law, or at least a semblance of upholding the law. This is interesting. It's not on topic, but this is correct. This is my department, and I'll answer, sort of address this when we get to our monologue. But DSM, I'm not sure what that is. I actually like RBN, so DSM must mean something bad. But they seem to really have gone in hyper focus against progressives. So Corey, you must not have been around all of 2023. Because that was a strategic plan. All of 2023 is to take down or attack and disarm or reduce the influence of the progressive Democrat and the progressive strategy. So that was the strategy last year, and that was mainly my job to kind of go at that, and it was a lot of content at that. But they're revving up their ugly heads again because they're pivoting to vote blue no matter who with Genocide Joe. So there's now time to kind of revisit that era. Anytime they are doing something to lead the working class off the cliff, it is time for RBN to come in. Okay, now it's time to reactivate this particular thing. We said we moved on, but since they're going back to this, we're going to go back to this. And it being my primary job, we all kind of have duties here, and we'll move on. The story of Donald Trump, we're moving on from, and I'll just answer this and then get to the story. But we all kind of have duties here, and it wasn't anything planned. It just kind of fell into what we liked, so it kind of it's good that we didn't overlap. JB kind of is our emotional sort of our compassion. That's a better word because I'm emotional too. So compassionate person. So he covers a lot of our gut-wrenching sort of topics. That's sort of what JB does. Nick and I always talk about how it's harder for us to do those topics because of the raw emotion, but JB covers those sort of topics. So that's kind of like his wheelhouse. Then we got Rome. That is the man on the street. He is doing the most work of all the members in the field, but that is his thing. We all kind of have our thing. And then he casually sometimes pops in on our streams to chime in, but he's going to be doing more. He's going to be bringing back Rome's Rebellion. Then you have Nick, that's kind of like foreign policy. He's kind of like the foreign policy police state. That is his sort of just default focus because, I mean, he's the one who created 10 Demands. So that's kind of like his thing, which is great. And I always say Nick is the smartest one. He holds the most information on an array of different topics. So he's probably the smartest one as far as containing information. And then Sabby is she does a lot of different things, but she is our sort of activist in the street. Rome is our man in the street, kind of doing work in the street. Whereas Sabby is doing a lot of housing activism. Sabby brings a lot of activists onto her show. She covers a lot of like labor and housing issues a lot deeper than a lot of some other of us. And then she's also our person who is the sort of the face of RBN, or who we want to be the face of RBN. She's the one that has the degree. She's the one that is more professional, more cordial with people. She's the one who will get guests to come on her show that will never come, like a Khanna would never come on an RBN. So she is the person that can professionally and eloquently and politely, surgically pick somebody apart in interviews, and that's her thing. And then for me, I attack more of election, more of the blue-red. I'm more of the attack person for the duopoly. I'm more of the progressive strategy. That's more of my wheelhouse. So that's just a rundown of sort of what we do, just to kind of address what that first part was. But we're going to get into our main story. But before we do that, the target is 800 likes. So if you will be so kind and hit that like button to get us to 800 likes for the stream, would greatly appreciate it. And if you haven't checked out our merchandise, we have our most popular item is our hoodie or our logo, our main logo, the RBN logo, mug, whether it's a mug or hoodie or shirt. And then our second most popular is our NATO, the one that says NATO is a terrorist organization, whether it's on a mug or a t-shirt or hoodie. I think most frequently it's the hoodie that we sell it on. Check that part out also. But let's get into the main and the title a story here. Let me see here. Let me set this up the right way here. Yeah, okay. So let me bring this up because I was listening. Anytime I try to stay on top, anytime Stone puts out content, I'm a fan of a person who does comedy or who does politics with a little humor. That's why I gravitate to like a Jimmy Dore. But when you insert him, also a Lee Camp, also a Ron the Clone. So when you have humor, I don't know. I think that's a plus. So anytime she drops something, I'm always sort of on it. And just recently she dropped one that is sort of in my wheelhouse, just based on what I just told you about what of kind of all the wheelhouse of every member here. And in classic Caitlin Johnstone style, she addresses the Palestine and the worthless Western liberal. Now, I kind of changed the title for my segment. Hers is slightly different if you wanted to go check this out. But before we get to some of the content, I do want to kind of address some of the things. So what is a worthless Western liberal? And I can tell you what that is, but I can show you better. Let me put the graphic back up. So all of the people you see on here would fall into this category. Now, I don't think any of them would label themselves a liberal, but liberal kind of has a bad connotation. So, and liberals know that. So they all kind of jumped on being called progressives. I mean, Hillary Clinton calls herself a progressive. Nancy Pelosi calls herself a progressive. I mean, it's just vomitorious to even think that they're progressives, right? And then the reason I have Cornel West and Marianne Williamson on there is because they're the two presidential candidates that fall into this category of a worthless Western liberal too. And then Pramila Jayapal and Khanna have two interviews that is going to illustrate this point of the worthless Western liberal we're going to be covering. And then there's an article by, is his name Robert Rauch, the guy in the bottom left-hand corner right above live on the graphic right there. This guy writes an article against people who say I'm not voting for the lesser of two evil. The article is based on him saying, I hate when people make that argument. So I know a lot of you are making that argument here in the audience, so you're going to love when we get to that. So there's a lot of content and articles to get to that we're going to be covering here. But I did want to kind of just sort of just define, talk about the terms and make sure we're on the same page. So let's talk about what a worthless liberal is. And I showed you the pictures, but it's people. Let me break it down this way. Let's define. So what makes them liberal? And this is not any specific definition. It's just my understanding of the topic and why I refer to these people as liberal is because they're very reactionary. They're very status quo. So how can you label yourself a progressive, which by definition means you're moving forward or making progress? You're not. You are a liberal. You are fine with the overall structure of the status quo, like 99% of it, but you just want to make a couple of tweaks, a couple of changes here on the fringes. So that is the liberal part. Now, we already know Western. We're basically talking about white European countries. We're talking about United States. We're talking about France. We're talking about Britain, these types of countries. And then what makes them worthless is the point that is made by Caitlin Johnstone. And I think she makes it very well. So I'm going to let her answer that point. It's a lot of what we've said a lot here. All of the members have said about a lot of these, what we call social democrats. We call them social democrats. In this segment, they're being labeled Western liberals. They refer to themselves as progressives or progressive Democrats. So all of those words are the same person. So let's listen to Caitlin. I might stop it here and there, but for the most part, I want to let it play. It's not long at all. It's like 5 minutes. So
on Palestine and the worthlessness of the Western liberal. There's an infuriatingly common type of liberal who purports to oppose Israel's actions in Gaza while also saying they support Israel's right to exist.
This very first out of the gate point she makes, is what makes them worthless. If on one hand you are saying pour this and let's get this person food and this, and then you turn around and give money and weapons to the person who put that person in that humanitarian crisis, what does that mean? You're worthless. You're playing both sides of the fence. That's what makes them worthless. So I hope I define now with that little snippet, that little first little part of this article. It's an audio article to define worthless Western liberal. Worthless because they're playing both sides. Western because of where we're at, the United States and other Western countries, white countries. And then liberal, they're not progressive because they're very status quo. So that's what we're addressing, regardless of what they call themselves. So I rewind it back, and then I'll let it play.
There's an infuriatingly common type of liberal who purports to oppose Israel's actions in Gaza while also saying they support Israel's right to exist, as though Israel's existence is somehow separable from its genocidal murderousness. This is a state that literally cannot exist without nonstop violence and tyranny, as demonstrated by its entire unbroken history since its inception. It was set up as a settler colonialist outpost for Western imperialism from the very beginning, and that's exactly what it's been ever since. History has conclusively established that it is not possible to drop an artificial ethno-state on top of an already existing population, in which the pre-existing population is legally subordinate to the new one, without tremendous amounts of warfare, police violence, mass displacement, apartheid, disenfranchisement, and oppression. This is not actually debatable. It is a settled matter, no pun intended. Is it possible to have a nation in which Jews are welcomed and kept safe? Of course. Many such nations exist outside of Israel, and the majority of the world's Jews live in them. What isn't possible is a Jewish ethno-state in historic Palestine in which the pre-existing population is treated as less than the Jewish population. That does not necessarily entail nonstop violence, tyranny, and abuse. This is self-evidently a direct contradiction in goals, but it's what the liberals we're discussing here pretend to believe is a reasonable possibility. There absolutely could be a state in that region wherein Palestinians and Jews coexist peacefully, but it would be so wildly different from present-day Israel that you can't pretend it would be the same state as the one we see now. It would entail such a radically dramatic overhaul of Israeli civilization, such a comprehensive dismantling of deeply ingrained racism, such a drastic restructuring of governmental and living systems, so much labor, sacrifice, humility, inner work, and reparations, that to call it by the same name as the state that presently exists would be nonsensical. And that isn't what the liberals in question are talking about instituting when they say they oppose Israel's atrocities in Gaza but support Israel's right to exist. What they are saying is that they want Israel to remain the unjust and tyrannical apartheid state that it has always been, but for the killing to stop. They want the injustice.
Yeah. So you get just the inherent position of the social democrats, the liberals, the progressive Democrats of saying Israel has the right to defend themselves, and then saying poor Palestinians, forget the point I was making. Oh, hang on, let me listen to this one more time.
And tyrannical
shouldn't have read that comment. I'll put it up in a second.
Apartheid state that it has always been, but for the killing to stop.
Right. So they want to keep in place the apartheid state, but just make the apartheid state more livable. So if you want to put it in the context of the United States, they would have been the people who saying, let's keep slavery, but let's give them better housing. Let's keep slavery, but let's, give them 2-hour lunch. It's wanting to keep the, how is that an effective ally? How is that standing in solidarity to say, I want to keep the overall structure the same, which is Israel has a right to defend himself, but let's make it a little more humane. That is essentially what all of these Western liberals are arguing. Everybody on that graphic that we have. Well, let's get back to the video. I'll put that comment up. That threw me off in just a second here.
They want the injustice to continue, but they want its most overt manifestations to stop causing them cognitive dissonance. They want the status quo without the murderous savagery that is necessary for the status quo's existence. They want to protect.
It's the same. This is the same sort of position, cowardly sort of position that is the issue with social democrats. It's the same sort of framing they give to the unhoused population, as you saw on TYT with Anna, and they're attacking. It's that they just wanted out of sight. They want the killings. They want the atrocities not to be as such, so that it's out of sight. They're fine with the apartheid state. They're fine with that part. Let's continue. I'll play a little bit more. There's about 2 minutes left, and then we get to the rest of the presentation.
Pretend they live in an imaginary fantasy land where such a thing is possible. In order to make this fantasy seem more believable,
I'm going to rewind it. So this last point she's making is a little bit more coherent.
But they want its most overt manifestations to stop causing them cognitive dissonance. They want the status quo without the murderous savagery that is necessary for the status quo's existence. They want to pretend they live in an imaginary fantasy land where such a thing is possible. In order to make this fantasy seem more believable, liberals will pretend that the violence we are seeing can be blamed entirely on the Netanyahu government, as though things would be fine without Bibi in office, despite the fact that Israel's abusiveness began long before he showed up.
Correct. I mean, how many different prime ministers have overseen the killings of Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza? So and I said this many times, I can't remember which stream. So for progressive Democrats, this is what they're leaning on, because this is what's acceptable in establishment, and they understand they have boundaries. This is what progressives are very keen on, boundaries that is allowed by the establishment. Khanna is very keen. He's one of the best at that. He understands how to make an establishment's point of view sound a progressive, for example. But let's listen a little more, because I want to get to his actual interview.
And despite the fact that Israel's atrocities in Gaza have the approval of the vast majority of Israelis. Israeli violence isn't the product of Netanyahu. Netanyahu is the product of Israeli violence. He built his political career upon sentiments that were already in place. They'll also tell themselves fairy tales about a two-state solution to make their position seem more valid, ignoring inconvenient facts like that Israeli officials have been openly saying a Palestinian state will never happen.
This is what they do. This is like what AOC and the progressive do with selling Medicare for all, when Joe Biden explicitly says he's going to veto it. You're talking about, the United States is talking about a two-state solution, and progressives in particular, talking about a two-state solution when the government explicitly says they're not going to do that. This is what makes them weak. How do you say I'm advocating for Medicare for, I'm going to put it in terms that we understand. I'm advocating for Medicare for all through this team, and the team is called We Don't Want Fucking Medicare for All. Social Democrats, let's continue.
That Israeli Jews overwhelmingly oppose such a measure, and that Israeli settlements are being built in Palestinian territories with the explicit goal of making a future two-state solution impossible.
Right.
Liberals subscribe to these fantasies as a kind of cognitive pacifier, which allows them to relax and feel okay with themselves, despite the fact that they're not actually endorsing any viable path toward justice.
All these little carve-outs they have is for them to appear left, them to appear compassionate, them to appear all of these things, but you're fine with the establishment structure, the establishment overarching point. Such a great point by Caitlin. I'll let her make it again. I think it was right around here.
Future two-state solution impossible. Liberals subscribe to these fantasies as a kind of cognitive pacifier, which allows them to relax and feel okay with themselves, despite the fact that they're not actually endorsing any viable path toward justice.
Right. So let's put it in terms of the United States. It's that we're living in a slave state, and they're going, well, you know, let's get the slaves more time off. Let's get them this. Let's get them this, without ever saying let's end slavery, because that's too hard of a mountain to climb for a social democrat. Let's continue.
And to be clear, this isn't just what liberals do with regard to Israel-Palestine. It's their whole entire position on everything.
Yes.
On every issue, their position is little more than maintain the status quo, but make it pretty and psychologically comfortable for me. They never want to do what's right. They just want to feel like they are right. Theirs is an imperialist, militarist, tyrannical, oligarchic ideology with a bunch of feel-good social justice bumper stickers slapped on top of it. A boot on your neck and a flower in its hair. That's who liberals are. It's who they've always been. Phil Ox released the song Love Me, I'm a Liberal in 1966, and they haven't changed one iota ever since. The issues change, their arguments change, but their maintain the status quo but let me feel nice about it values system has remained exactly the same for generations.
Mm-hmm. And there you go. Thank you, Caitlin. That is just an awesome audio article that I saw and I wanted to cover. Great article. Now let's get to the next part of the presentation here. And let's see where we are in my presentation, everybody. Here. Okay, so this next part here, so I said that what we define what makes a worthless Western liberal, and Caitlin Johnstone beautifully and comically, in some spaces and some parts comically speaks about that and define who they are. And of course she has the most popular face of this person, this type of person, political person that we're talking about, which is Bernie Sanders. Now, the next part I wanted to cover is the Ro Khanna. And Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal will be used as examples. So these are, I'm going to go over examples of these Western liberals and show you in their interviews what makes them as such. Let me see if I can bring this up here. All right, so I have it on Twitter. I was trying to see where can I get it to it quickly. So let's get to the interview that Ro Khanna does on Face the Nation. Now he says, you know, when he goes on these interviews with corporate media, he says a lot of progressive sounding names, or at least in the corporate space, that is definitely progressive sounding. So a lot of people give him kudos for that, but let's see how RBN breaks down this interview he does on Face the Nation. And the way I describe it is he in the interview, he admits he is a Biden administration surrogate towards the end. How are you that, but at the same time you're speaking about the uncommitted campaign? You're speaking about the people who are not supporting Biden. Like, you're speaking about Palestine. It's awkward. But anyway, and I think she brings it up in the interview for that point that I'm making here. Let's listen.
And we're joined now here by Democratic Congressman Ro Khanna of California. Good morning. Good to have you here.
Thank you, Margaret.
I imagine you support the decision to airdrop in aid to Gaza. But this is only happening because an ally of the United States, the largest recipient of U.S. military aid in the world, was not allowing in the aid. And now that it is coming across the border, the distribution is a massive, logistically complicated and unsafe operation. Should there be consequences for standing in the way of U.S. humanitarian aid?
Yes, Margaret, there should. I mean, we should make it clear that we're not going to continue to transfer weapons, as I asked Secretary Austin at the hearing. But Margaret, look.
He didn't answer you.
He did not, but even you could tell from his testimony that he was concerned that we were continuing to transfer aid. Look, we can't transfer weapons. We can't continue to transfer weapons while we're transferring aid. That policy doesn't make sense. Here's the thing. Look, the killing of over 100 Palestinians who are simply going to a food truck to get food, whether by a stampede or by shooting. We don't know all the facts. There should be an investigation, but that has shocked the conscience of the world. And
you see, social democrat, Western liberal, progressive Democrat, that's all the same person. You see the weakness here. And let me see if you spot it. Listen to what he says.
Transfer weapons. We can't continue to transfer weapons while we're transferring aid. That policy doesn't make sense. Here's the thing. Look, the killing of over 100 Palestinians who are simply going to a food truck to get food, whether by a stampede or by shooting. We don't.
Now, this position, whether or by stampede or no, this is by gunfire. Everybody knows that. But because the state of Israel, who you still support, came up with some bogus reason, you have to give Israel's bogus reason the same validity as the truth. When Ro Khanna can say here, Israel said that it was mostly because of stampede, that story sounds ridiculously crazy and illogical. So we're not going to go with it. He could just say that. But he has to give lip service here. Because again, social democrats really aren't trying to go at the jugular of power. They're just trying to get power to do things a little bit more nicer. Let's continue.
We don't know all the facts. There should be an investigation. But that has shocked the conscience of the world. And my plea to this president, who I support deeply, is, Mr. President, call for a permanent ceasefire. There's too much suffering.
So he supports deeply the guy who is funding and supporting a genocide, and then he calls himself the person who's calling for a ceasefire. How does that work? How does it work for the Palestinians, Ro Khanna, that you are calling for a ceasefire, but then you want to support and put back in office the guy who's supporting the genocide and refusing to call for a ceasefire? Let's continue. Just
and the
illogical.
release of all hostages. The policy of bear hugging Netanyahu has not worked. Reach out to some of the former Obama.
Here's another weak making them weak because they don't want to challenge power. They're trying to use the same talking point that the establishment has chosen to lean on. Let's separate the state of Israel from Netanyahu and just blame Netanyahu. You know why? Because he has like a 4 or 5% approval rating in Israel. He's on the way out, so they feel like they can throw him under the bus. Israel's been
officials
terrible
like Ben
way
Rhodes,
before
Tommy
Netanyahu.
Whiter, who have been saying we need a new direction of policy. We need a permanent ceasefire, release of hostages. We need to call for a Palestinian state, a summit with our Gulf allies. The current policy is not working.
Do you believe truly in an election year that the president of the United States could be that head-on direct in criticizing the prime minister of Israel?
You see how that shocks the establishment system to think that our leader can call what Israel's doing a genocide, can call out the Netanyahu. She is saying, do you really? She's saying, like, you're in this business. You know how ridiculous you sound? Do you really think that's going to happen? That's what she's posing here. Let's listen to what he says in the rest of the interview.
Israel?
Yes, you know who was? President Obama.
Yes.
And he won 2 terms. And, you know, Ben
Which
Rhodes.
Mr. Biden didn't agree with when he was vice president.
Well, look, Ben Rhodes actually, he texted me this picture of Wisconsin in 2012 with 2 days before the election. And they were a sea of young people out there, hundreds of thousands of young people. We need that base. I don't think in the head-to-head polling, this is the issue that is showing up. But I'll tell you, this is an issue for activists. This is an issue for organizers. This is an issue for young folks. And this is going to be a turnout election. And right now, they want a new moral direction for our nation and for what's going on. Everyone agrees Hamas is a terrorist organization. What they did on October.
Everybody don't agree on these 2 points, that Hamas is a terrorist organization and what they did on October 7th is a terrorist act. Everybody does not agree on that.
October 7th is brutal.
But this is another point that keeps progressive Democrats at the child's table instead of outside. They just want to be inside the house, anywhere seated. It's wall to wall. They just say, I just want to be inside. And they said, go sit at the kids' table. But this is the price of admission. You have to go with the establishment talking points on the main top issues, like Hamas is a terrorist organization and October 7th was a terrorist act. You can't defer. You can't go off that talking point. And social Democrats, a.k.a. Worthless Western liberals, aka progressive Democrats, they don't want to disrupt enough to be kicked out of the room and be put outside.
It should be condemned unequivocally. But the point is now it's time to get a permanent ceasefire and a release of the hostages. And the president can do it. With one call, he can do it.
Well, that we'll see. But on what you just went to from policy to politics, you are a Biden campaign surrogate.
Proudly,
you say.
You are a Biden campaign surrogate, proudly. How can this be? How can you be a proud surrogate of a person committing genocide that you're calling a ceasefire for? You see what social Democrats are willing. Think about what social Democrats are willing to do when they're advocating for voting for Joe Biden. They're saying that our democracy, this fake democracy that's leaving out tens of millions of people, our pseudo-democracy is more important than the genocide. There's no other way to make the case for Biden without that being the analysis. if you say, I will never support somebody, who supports slavery, then you make a cutout and say, well, if this person who supports slavery is against this person, then I'll support the person who's like that. No, I don't think so. Anyway, let's before I go off on a tangent, I can feel it. Let's listen some more to Ro Khanna.
In announcing the airdrops, I want to play this soundbite for you because this is what President Biden said.
In the coming days, we're going to join with our friends in Jordan and others in providing airdrops of additional food and supplies into Ukraine, and seek to continue to open up other avenues into Ukraine, including the possibility of a Marine corridor to deliver large amounts of humanitarian assistance.
This was a big decision. This was a big announcement. And the President of the United States twice got confused as to the country and place where the aid was being dropped. He said Ukraine twice.
He
Doesn't that
misspoke.
concern you?
I just misspoke earlier when I said we need to stop.
Now, this is a side point that she's making, that he made a mistake, several mistakes in this interview. And then he said, I love how the people who are defending Joe Biden and his cognitive decline, I love how they try to point out how other people are misspeaking. The reason you're seeing a difference in the poll, even though their age is close, is because the age is not really it. People see a difference. So even if you compare Donald Trump misspeaking a name versus Joe Biden, because both of them spoke the wrong name or wrong date, that doesn't mean the reason they misspoke the wrong name and date is the same. People know Donald Trump is just stupid. That's it. He's just stupid. No interest in being intellectual whatsoever. And people can see that that's not the case for Joe Biden. And they pretend like, like it's the same. But anyway, that's what he's doing here. Another thing about worthless Western liberals.
Stop transferring weapons. I said aid. I mean, people misspeak on television.
This was the announcement of a major policy change.
Here's the thing. I have been very direct in criticizing the president's policy in the Middle East. I have spoken with the president. He is fully coherent. He is on top of details when I have talked to him.
Yeah, he's fully coherent. He just walks like his legs are about to give out. He just walks like this now because he knows he might stumble, and he knows he's been coached to make sure you don't stumble, sir. So what he does when he walks, he's concentrating. Let me make sure I don't fall down. What's the guy, the molester guy from Family Guy? That's who Joe Biden is. The guy with the walker. Take the walker away. That's how Joe Biden walks. Like he has an imaginary walker in front of him. And y'all want to act, and these people want to act like people can't see that. I can clearly see this guy gingerly walking. Ro Khanna?
Just a couple of weeks ago, my view is let's focus on policy. Let's focus on saving lives.
Gotcha.
And he'll have the opportunity to make the case about his age to the American people. But I have confidence in that part of it. I believe what he needs to do is to stop the killing, the suffering.
Yeah. But you are also talking about young voters and progressive voters. And they see that. On the issue of the policy, in Michigan, we saw these two efforts to essentially protest against Joe Biden by coming out and voting uncommitted. In Minnesota, another Super Tuesday state, there's a similar campaign underway. Are we going to see something like that in California as well?
There are efforts on uncommitted in California, a number of other Super Tuesday states, and in Wisconsin. It's significant. I don't think, look, the president's winning overwhelmingly, and I don't think in the primaries, and I don't think this is going to affect his vote total, but it is going to affect his turnout and base. But Margaret, this is not just a political issue. This is a humanitarian catastrophe. Secretary Austin said over 25,000 dead. our weapons.
This is where Ro Khanna is very good. Ro Khanna listens to social media. He listens to the phrasing, and he knows how to use language that sounds radical, but that sounds radical. Let me just leave it there. And I'm going to just rewind it just slightly so you can hear what I'm saying here. Maybe radical's not
Minnesota,
correct.
another Super Tuesday state. There's a similar campaign underway. Are we going to see something like that in California as well?
There are efforts on uncommitted in California, a number of other Super Tuesday states, and in Wisconsin. It's significant. I don't think, look, the president's winning overwhelmingly, and I don't think in the primaries, and I don't think this is going to affect his vote total, but it is going to affect his turnout and base. But Margaret, this is not just a political issue. This is a humanitarian catastrophe.
They've been saying that part. This is not just a political issue. This is a humanitarian. Isn't that what Listen Michigan? Isn't that what the mayor of Dearborn has been saying on those interviews like several months ago? Ro Khanna sees that. And he picks up on how to talk about the subject, and he knows how to manipulate language. He's one of the best at it, in my opinion. I've talked about this before, how he pivots to progressive talking points a lot, even out of the blue. And we saw that in that interview, one of the interviews he did with Bree on Bad Faith.
Catastrophe. Secretary Austin said over 25,000 dead. Our weapons are going there. There's starvation that's taking place. There are reports that 58,000 more Palestinian dead within 6 months if we don't have a ceasefire. The president can get this done. The disagreement is Hamas wants a 4.5 month wait. Bibi Netanyahu doesn't want to have that long a ceasefire. Have the president in there, get it done. Become a peacemaker, recognize a Palestinian state, a two-state solution. And I think he can, and I think he can win back young people.
But just on the policy point, there aren't new authorities the president would need to halt those arms shipments. He has those authorities. He's choosing not to use them.
He has it, and he could call for a ceasefire. He can stop protecting them at the UN. There are a lot of levers. And I'm hoping.
You see how weird this is? The candidate that's preventing the ceasefire at the UN, the candidate that's supplying the weapons and funds, that's your candidate. But then at the same time, you're saying we need a ceasefire. At the same time, you're saying we need this humanitarian effort. This is the position of the Social Democrat, where they play both sides of the coin, of the issue. And first we started with Ro Khanna, and now we're going to move on to Pramila Jayapal, and it's for the same purpose, to illustrate the weakness of these in the worklessness of these Western liberals, aka social democrats, aka progressive Democrats, all the same person. So let's listen to Pramila Jayapal. And again, lots of good stuff, but then there's a lot of fence sitting which makes them unreliable allies also.
As always, it is a pleasure. You just heard the picture painted by Matt Bradley, and you know well what is happening on the ground right now in Gaza. How are you viewing the airdrops that were put together by the Biden administration?
Well, Yasmin, it's always good to see you and good to be on with you. Look, I think that it's important that we get whatever aid we can into Gaza. And so I'm supportive of the airdrops, but I just have to say 38,000 meals. There's 500,000 Palestinians in Gaza right now on the brink of starvation. And the fact is that the United States has been continuing to fund with military aid this war on Gaza, and Israel is refusing to open the borders and allow humanitarian aid in. So on almost every count, I have been saying for some time that I was one of the earliest people to call for a ceasefire. I believe now more than ever, it is clear that this Israeli government, Prime Minister Netanyahu, does not share the stated goals of the United States.
You see how she's saying Netanyahu instead of the state of Israel? Because saying that the state of Israel doesn't share our shared goals, it has not been approved by the establishment. You can make that claim about the Netanyahu. The progressives are very keen on what's acceptable, and they walk that line so they're so alert about where that line is. That's a better way of saying it. Let's continue.
States of America, not on getting humanitarian aid in and ensuring that the least number of Palestinians are killed or injured, not in terms of a permanent two-state solution for peace that allows Palestinians and Israelis to live side by side with security and freedom, and certainly not in terms of the stated things that the United States continues to say. For example, if Israel launches this attack on Rafah, it is absolutely a violation of human rights, of international humanitarian law. And I think many of the things they've done already have been violations of international humanitarian law. And so I have been saying publicly and privately to the White House that it is time to make a dramatic shift in our foreign policy towards Israel.
Now, this is a point that is correct. And I do agree, a dramatic shift. Now, of course, the Social Democrats are going to, that shift is not going to be the sort of shift that we would like, but I'm sure any sort of virtue signaling that the Biden campaign does, that the Social Democrats will say, oh, that's a good enough shift. Let's listen.
We need an immediate permanent ceasefire. We need to get aid into Gaza. We need to begin the reconstruction, and we need to force Israel to the table. And, you know, we're talking about a different government for the Palestinians, a different government for the Israelis, where we can have a legitimate negotiation around what a long-term peace looks like in the Middle East.
Are they receptive to what you are saying, the White House? Are they receptive to saying there needs to be a major change in our policy towards Israel?
This is the $25,000 question that I remember Nick asking, maybe it was Marianne Williamson, something like it. Are the Democrats receptive to you requesting Medicare for all? Are the Democrats receptive to you saying a $15 minimum wage, which should be really $35 minimum wage? Are they receptive to your demands, progressives? Let's see what Pramila says. We all know the answer, though.
Well, I think you've seen some of the shift in rhetoric, but we need an actual policy shift. And we have leverage. I do not believe that we can say we don't have leverage when we are funding this war. We are complicit in what's happening, Yasmin. I mean, if you look at there's been reports showing that 83% of the bombs that have been dropped in Gaza are U.S. bombs.
So if we just didn't supply them with U.S. bombs, 83% less bombs would have been dropped. Let's continue.
These are U.S. military weapons. And so the idea that we are continuing to provide that funding to Israel as we see all of this tragedy. I mean, 30,000 Palestinians killed, 70%, that's over 20,000 of them, women and children starving, pregnant women living in tents, unable to figure out whether or not they're going to be able to deliver their babies, no hospitals. I mean, this is an absolute horror, and we cannot just say, oh, I'm sorry, you know, it's over the top, but refuse to do anything to get Israel to shift, or at least to completely distance ourselves and work with the rest of the Middle East allies to ensure that we have a long-term solution in the Middle East.
You say an incursion into Rafah would be a violation of international law. That is the only condition the United States has in giving continued aid to Israel. Otherwise, it is the only country that does not have conditional aid beyond that condition. So is it time for that to change?
Israel is the only country that the United States supplies unconditional aid to, according to this anchor. We all knew this. Unconditional, you have to ask yourself, why are they picking unconditional aid for this particular country?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There should be conditions, but I actually think we need to go further than that. We cannot continue to provide this aid. I think all of those conditions have already shown to be broken. And defensive aid is one thing, but offensive military aid that is assisting in the destruction and the killing of Palestinians is not acceptable. And it is undermining our global influence around so many issues, including human rights, but our broader policies around the Middle East and our allies in the Middle East. And so I really think that this is time for a shift. I think the White House is listening. I hope that that shift is going to come very, very soon, because I don't see Israel willing to recognize that even the stated goal of eliminating Hamas, this is not going to happen by killing tens of thousands of Palestinians and destroying Gaza and allowing for Israeli cabinet members to call for essentially the complete elimination of Palestinians in Gaza. That is just, it's horrific. And I think we have to look at the tragedy. We have to look at the fact that we do have leverage. And President Joe Biden is probably the only person, the United States is probably the only player that can make a significant difference with Middle East allies and with our European allies, most of whom are in the same place that I'm articulating today on your show.
You talk about the international implications here. There are domestic implications, and we saw that in Michigan. I was on the ground in Michigan talking to a lot of Muslim Americans.
So she spent a good chunk of time and said a lot of great things about what's happening over in Gaza and her analysis. Now, as we pivot back domestically and still sort of talking about what's happening in Palestine, but through the lens of uncommitted, meaning electoral. Let's see what she does here from this point.
American and Arab American voters, 13% voting uncommitted in the Democratic primary. And I know when Barack Obama was running in the primary, he got about 11% of that uncommitted vote. So this is something that has happened before. However, some of the people that I spoke to said it doesn't matter what, at this point, the president does. They're not going to be voting for him in the general. There is no way he can get them back because they felt this personally. Right? They have lost family members, lost entire bloodlines at this point in Gaza. How does the president and his reelection campaign, how do they gain back some of those votes? Can they?
I do think it's possible. I think the timeline is short. I think very quickly we need the policy shift. Rhetoric is important. Language is very important. I'm going to be watching very closely at State of the Union also for what the president says on this and how he talks about it. But it has to be a policy shift. And then at the same time, we have to really rebuild the trust and the relationships between progressives in Congress, progressives across the country, progressives in key states. And we have to have an agenda that reflects a dramatic recognition that progressives are a major part of the coalition that allowed Joe Biden to win in 2020. It was a fragile coalition. We had a lot of structures in 2020 that made that work, including the Biden-Sanders Unity Task Forces. We can't do the exact same thing this time, but I am in conversation with the White House about how we start to frame up what it is we are fighting for. So,
did you hear that part? And that was my cue. She's in talk with the White House to help frame, to trick people. She's out here saying all those great things that she said the first half of this video. But she's in talks with the White House on how to trick people to come back. I doubt she's in talk for the White House to do a ceasefire. She just goes on TVs and hope that he sees a segment she does on the many cable news channels that's out there.
The deep threats our democracy faces if Donald Trump comes in again, but also what is President Joe Biden and what do Democrats push for and stand for both domestically and internationally. So it's going to be a long haul. I believe it's possible, but those shifts have to start now. And Yasmin, I just have to say, it can't be shaking your finger at people and saying, well, you should just vote for Joe Biden because he's better than Donald Trump. It's not going to work. It doesn't work with our kids. It's not going to work with the progressive base across the country. We have to respect where they are, the moral outrage they're feeling, and then we have to win back deliberately the votes of people across this country.
Congresswoman Jayapal.
So that's Jayapal. And her part of the segment was not supposed to be negative, even though I had some commentary. It was supposed to be about her being one of the few people coming out and saying, hey, there needs to be an actual policy shift. So she says there needs to be a policy shift, and Kamala Harris goes to an event. I think it's Bloody Sundays, a Bloody Sunday event. It was like a Black historical sort of event for a Black audience, and she comes out and makes a claim of, we need a ceasefire now. So is this the shift? Is this the shift that Pramila Jayapal has been in talks about? Let's listen to what Kamala Harris says about what's happening in Gaza.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
You ever hear a radio commercial and they go, whatever the product, yeah, this product for this and this and this and this, and it's only $9.99. You get all this stuff. And then, like, under their breath, at the fastest pace, they go, this is the, they have all these details. That's what she just did. She paused for the soundbite of, we need to have an immediate ceasefire, that soundbite, and then gave the details of the rest there. So I'll rewind it for you to hear what I mean. I'll let it play.
In Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire.
Under your breath.
For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table.
Oh, God.
This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in.
So this is not what you think it is. This is not the Biden administration through Kamala Harris changing course and saying, calling for a ceasefire. There is negotiations going on, and they have made their final offer to Hamas, and this is them trying to pressure Hamas to take this latest ceasefire offer that they're offering. That's why she gives the fine print later. After the soundbite, she goes, for the next 6 weeks. We need a permanent ceasefire for the next 6 weeks. That's what's being negotiated. And that's all this is. It is not at all the Biden administration making a shift. So what Pramila Jayapal says she's in talks with, we haven't seen any deliverables on that, because a 6 week ceasefire is not a permanent ceasefire. And we all know once Israel gets all of the hostages resolved, whether they get them back alive or not, they're going to press on, because if they don't press on, then the country turns to Benjamin Netanyahu and says, hey, buddy, it's time for you to go. Hamas knows this. This is why this is a sticking point. But they're trying to pressure Hamas to accept this deal. But let's listen. I'm going to rewind it again because it's funny. But this time I'm going to let it play the entire time. It's 44 seconds. Let the entire thing play.
And given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. This will get the hostages out and get a significant amount of aid in. This would allow us to build something more enduring, to ensure Israel is secure, and to respect the right of the Palestinian people to dignity, freedom, and self-determination.
For 6 weeks.
And given.
For 6 weeks. They will try to co-op whatever you let them co-op. And that's what she was trying to do here. Now, what I want to do next is do a slight shift in the show. This first part of the show, we've been talking about Palestine and the worthless Western liberal. That's primarily what we've been kind of talking about. I want to do a slight shift where it's still Palestine involved, still the genocide is involved, but we're slightly taking a different perspective. Now we're going to go into the weakest candidate ever, named Joe Biden. So now we're going to kind of make a shift in that direction, and that takes me to Face the Nation. Now, Face the Nation this past Sunday had on Khanna and a couple of other guests, but what Face the Nation also had to do was cover one of their latest polls. Now, Face the Nation is on CBS, and CBS, just like I think it was Saturday, came out. Let me bring up Face the Nation. Face the Nation came out. I'm sorry, CBS came out with a. Oops, I did not mean to do that. Face the Nation came out with a new. I said that wrong again. CBS came out with a new poll does not go well for Joe Biden. So let's cover that. I'm going to switch over. So let's take Kamala Harris. I know all of you are happy to see her come down off the screen. And let's go to Face the Nation. Because in our pivot here, oops, let me pause it. In our pivot here, and I think my starting point is the 2 minute and 20 second mark. I think it's here. In our pivot to the weakest candidate ever, let's just start out with some numbers. So why are we able to even call him the weakest candidate ever? Let's go over some of the latest polling numbers by CBS, and that's why it's on Face the Nation. Let me actually shout out one thing. Let's check and see if we have a super chat. Yeah, we got 2 super chats. Let me read those before I move on here. Is that Amini Zaria? Please, CJ, do an in-depth of the free and equal debate. I will look into that. Somebody else mentioned that debate. But thank you for the super chat. MAD, I wonder what country that is. And then, of course, Janice, a regular. What's up, Janice? It's not a shift, it's a grift. Great point. She's literally pushing a deal that has been rejected by both sides. Don't fall for their BS. Those calling for policy shifties or shifts, I would assume that's what that means. Shouldn't our lying are as well? They're Zionists. Policy shifts are lying as well. They're Zionists. I hope I read that right. Thank you for that super chat. And again, hit that like button. The goal is 800 likes. The goal 800 likes. Let's get into this next video. And then we're going to start getting into some articles here. So we're shifting to the candidate. And let's start with this polling data. Latest polling data from CBS.
Important week in the 2024 election in which both President Biden and former President Trump are expected to win hundreds of delegates in Super Tuesday contests in more than 15 states. On Thursday, Mr. Biden will make his State of the Union address. Our CBS News poll out this morning shows the former president with a 4-point edge over the current president among likely voters nationwide. That is Trump's largest general election lead yet in our surveys this cycle. Joining us now is our Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto. Anthony, good to have you here.
Good morning.
So our polling has shown perceptions of the economy have been improving. So why isn't that helping Joe Biden?
Because it's the comparison that people are making between how they rate the economy today.
Now, listen to this, and you can hear the arrogance in the host voice, but listen to this trying to dispel people's reaction, people's feelings, what people think about the economy. Listen to this part here because of the assessment by people giving Donald Trump more credit. Listen to how they talk about people's memory.
And what they remember it being during the Trump years.
Let me go back 15 seconds and let it play here.
Perceptions of the economy have been improving. So why isn't that helping Joe Biden?
Because it's the comparison that people are making between how they rate the economy today and what they remember it being during the Trump years. And it's the remembering is the key word there. I specifically asked, how do you remember it? And 2/3 of voters say they remember it being good, which is also interesting because if you go back and look at the polling from that time, people did in fact rate it good in 2018, 2019, but then views of the economy cratered after the pandemic and the shutdowns. And it doesn't seem like they're remembering that part of it here, but that's the reality today. So it's that comparison that isn't holding up for the White House, number one. And then number two, you push that forward and ask, well, whose policies might make prices go down? And there's a lot of Republicans who think that prices will go down if Donald Trump gets elected. But what's troubling for Joe Biden is that you still get him associated with price increases because a lot of people think that prices will continue to go up under his policies. That's why.
Memory is an interesting thing, isn't it?
Memory is an interesting thing, even though he just said the polls at that time reflected. So it's not just memory. Contemporaneously, you have evidence of polls that he looked back on and say, yes, they were reflecting on the economy at the time being better during Trump. And then what does he say? Just think about it. This is the gaslighting they're trying to get you to say, oh, your memory is faulty. Really? Because what does he say? Why would they think back and say a Donald Trump presidency, now think about his 4 years, was overall better economically? They're going to give him a better rating. Is that faulty memory? Now listen to what he said, because he says we went back and looked at polling and they gave him a good rating in 18, 19. Then he says, then something happened to the economy, the pandemic. You mean towards the end of his freaking presidency? Because remember, he's in the office in 17, 18, 19. Or actually 16, 17, 18, 19. So all those years, it's been good or at least steady. And then the final year, 19, the end of 19 and 20, pandemic hit and the economics goes down. They're supposed to judge his presidency off the smaller time frame. Gotcha. These people are just intellectually dishonest, and they say things without you. And if you don't critically think, you just go, oh yeah, that's crazy.
Anthony, the campaign is leaning heavily into issues of democracy, access to voting, even calling Donald Trump a threat to democracy itself. Why isn't that helping the Biden campaign?
Well, that's in the electorate's mind, but it's kind of priced in at this point in this sense. You get a majority of Americans that do think that the former president tried to stay in office past his constitutional term. The ones who think that his approach to that was illegal, which is just under half, are in fact voting for Joe Biden. But everybody else, the ones who think he was following constitutional processes or wasn't planning to stay, they're all ready to return Donald Trump to office. So that split in many ways kind of defines not just the race, but also where we are as a country right now. Maybe it moves a little bit as the trials go forward. Maybe if there's a conviction, certainly something to watch. But net, you get about an even split between Biden and Trump right now on who would do best at keeping democracy safe.
Democrats are.
So the thing they have been propagandizing for years, the thing of ending democracy of Trump, look at the polling on that. They've been pushing this propaganda so hard just to be winning by 1 point. In this poll, 34% say Biden wins on keeping democracy. 33% says Trump. That's their report card on this. This has to be devastating news for the establishment on this particular point about democracy, because they've been pushing this. They got January 6th. They got all these trials that's going on just for them to be 1 point up, and that's within the margin of error. Devastating.
Are putting reproductive rights front and center in this campaign, betting that it will drive turnout among voters across party lines who are just concerned about this issue. Is that a safe bet?
So there is a majority that feels that the overturn of Roe v. Wade was bad for the country. But what's interesting to me is this difference between then who blames Donald Trump for that, which is what the Biden campaign is trying to do. And that's a smaller number.
So this is another devastating poll number. Let me see if I can get it to. Here we go. This is another devastating poll number. Trump and Roe v. Wade overturned. Do you give him credit, blame, or neither? Do you give him blame for this? 33%. You mean all of this hand-wringing you've said about Donald Trump and how he appointed the justices that overturned Roe v. Wade, and all that's showing up in the polls is 33%. The plurality being 48% saying neither credit or blame. That's a problem. If one of your selling points for Joe Biden is abortion rights. That's a problem if that's to be that low. But let's listen.
But then coming even more immediately, the recent IVF ruling, we asked about that. And in fact, a large majority thinks that IVF should be legal. So again, this issue is going to stay top of mind and certainly is going to be a factor, I think.
And it's interesting because in Alabama, where that ruling happened 2 weeks ago, they are working very swiftly to protect it within the state legislature, and the governor are expected to look at some of those bills this week. So it shows how resonant that one issue is. But Anthony, this is going to be such a key week. We have Super Tuesday upon us. Has Biden been able to consolidate the base of his party, the people who are committed to coming out as Democrats?
Well, in many ways, no, not yet. And that's really important for two things. One is that a lot of the measures I've been describing here for Joe Biden are driven in part by the fact that Democrats are more critical of him and more critical of their president than Republicans are of Donald Trump. Now,
Is that always the case?
Well, in some ways, that's kind of typical for Democrats, right? It's often a more transactional approach, often a little more criticism in there, whereas Republicans, and they've told us, they really value loyalty to Donald Trump. So some of that is baked in. But having said that, it comes out in the political story in right now, Democrats being less likely to say that they'll definitely vote. And a lot of Joe Biden's numbers are in part lower because of that. His campaign has work to do to drive up that motivation. And he's not doing as well as he did in 2020 with some key Democratic groups. I would add this, though, Margaret, and I think it's important. Joe Biden is trailing Donald Trump when we ask, who has a vision for the country? And that speaks across party lines in many ways. And what I think is important there is that these are uncertain times in the minds of many voters. When people see uncertainty, even if they don't rate things right now as good, and they don't, they want a roadmap. They want to know where things are going. And that's a key gap that I'm going to watch over the next few months.
Fascinating. Anthony Salvanto, thank you for your insights.
So we start there so that we can get the floor, the foundation for this conversation of the weakest candidate ever in Joe Biden. And although he's the weakest candidate, where am I? Yeah, although he's the weakest candidate, you have people who are, I would say, shielding for Joe Biden, when you say. But what's different is when you have, or what rubs us the wrong way here at RBN is when you're supporting, how can I say this? Let me bring it up. Maybe that'll be different here. Let's go to the article. This is from Robert. How do you say his name? Rich? I think that's. I'll put it up on the screen and see if you. R-E-I-C. Robert Rich. You have people who, regardless of how bad Joe Biden is doing, regardless if he's committing a genocide in Palestine, regardless if he leaned on the Senate parliamentary not to bring a minimum wage increase, regardless if he's pushing for war in Israel, with China, with Ukraine, regardless of all of that, you have people like Robert, who's part of the Clinton administration, who's saying things and writing articles like this. The "I won't vote for the lesser of two evil" rubbish. So I'll read a snippet from his article here. Is along the right-hand side. Actually, I guess I can make this full. So I'll read a little bit. This is from the article. And maybe I'll read just a little bit here. By not voting or voting for a third party, they're actually casting a vote for Trump. Some respond by saying that Trump may be cursed, but they're sick and tired of voting for the lesser of two evils. So I'm going to pause here. So actually, no, let me read on, because he makes the point without me having to make it. He makes it right away. Wrong. Biden is not evil. Trump is truly evil. So I'll pause here. So Robert is saying, no, this is not the lesser of two evils. You have a choice between truly evil, and then you have a choice between a good guy. So good guys support genocides now, Robert. That's what happens. And Robert is a progressive. That's what he calls himself. That's how he markets himself, as a progressive. But let's continue with the article. If there's one argument I can't stand, this is him talking, it's the, quote, I'm not going to vote for the lesser of two evils argument. The fact is, America has a two-party system. You may not like it, but that's our reality. What is this on my screen? I can't see that. The founders did not opt for a parliamentary system where citizens have more options of whom to vote for. So one of the nominees from one of the two major parties is going to win. And if you don't vote, or you vote for a third party candidate, you're inevitably hurting the candidate from one of the major parties who's closest to you in values. I'm sorry. Donald Trump wants a Muslim ban and would commit the same genocide. And Joe Biden doesn't want the Muslim ban and wants a genocide. I'm sorry, neither of those positions are closest to me. They're not. A person who says, I'm going to veto Medicare for all isn't a person whose ideology is closest to mine. A person who wants to fund Nazis in Ukraine isn't a person whose ideology is closest to mine. Let's continue. Where did I leave off? And if you... Okay, so I didn't read it all here, but I'll finish it out. From one of the major parties who's closest to you in values and helping the one furthest from you, which perhaps wasn't a huge consequence 50 years ago. But as the Republican Party has gone fascist with unhinged Trump as its head, the potential consequences of your not voting or voting for a third party candidate are horrific. What's happening in Gaza is horrific. What you're describing, Robert, is not. And he's saying 50 years ago, not picking lesser two evil and sitting it out, that was okay. Because back then, the Republican Party wasn't crazy. You mean with Nixon? Is that what you're talking about? With Richard Nixon, they wasn't crazy? In the Vietnam War? That's 50 years ago. In 2016, many people knew Trump was out of his guard. I think that's how you say that. But they disliked Hillary so much they decided to sit on their hands and vote for the Green Party candidate, Jill Stein, rather than vote for what they describe as the lesser of two evil. And look what we got. What do we get? What do we get from a Donald Trump presidency that we're not getting from a Biden presidency? And what are we getting from a Biden presidency that we wouldn't get from a Trump presidency? Try competency at being an imperialist. Being more effective at being a neoliberal, being more effective at being a fascist. If Trump gets back into the Oval Office, it's likely to be even worse this time. It's so weird the way they talk about this, the two administrations, when people literally in polls are saying the Trump administration, that time was a better time. The polls are saying this, Robert. But this is the establishment progressive puppet coming out to, parrot the establishment lines of don't go third party and don't sit at home. Come vote for Genocide Joe. Now we're going to go to a short video. From actually, let me see where I'm at here. I can maybe come to it after here. Now, this next video is a short one. Case Study QB clipped it. This is Morning Joe. Where is it? Morning Joe. Morning Joe. Is it this one? Yeah, here we go. So we now move to another video here. And then we'll get to another article in just a second. I think we're gonna go video article. Yeah. In this video, for the week on the same sort of theme of the weakest candidate, we're talking about one of the more prevalent issues that keep coming up for the weakest candidate ever in Joe Biden. And that is his age. Now, his age is what the establishment uses when we're talking about his cognitive decline. They use that to mean age. We are talking about his cognitive decline, but they're leaning on the word age because they don't want to talk about that. So let's listen.
Well, you're right. Polls are, of course, a snapshot in time. And what we saw in ours was that voters are very concerned about Biden's age, and they are not as concerned about Donald Trump's age. We looked at people who voted for Biden last time around in 2020, and 61% of those voters said that they were worried his age would make him less effective. More concerning for the Biden campaign, about 20% said that they were worried he couldn't handle the job because of his age. Those numbers were just not the same among people who voted for Trump or the general, population of registered voters nationally. When you look at Donald Trump. So I think what we're seeing here is that age is an issue for the campaign. It's a concern for them. Republicans have been very effective about making this concern over several years. And Biden's team, while they're responding now, we see they're putting him out more. He did, the late night show last week where he sort of joked about it. He's taking more questions from reporters. They perhaps didn't address this right away and early enough and aggressive enough, and it has allowed to sort of fester and expand. And of course, they weren't helped by the special counsel report earlier last month. So this is an issue for voters, and there's just no getting around that.
Lisa, I noticed some interesting numbers in terms of young voters
yes,
and how that's changed relative to the poll I think you all did 3 months ago. Talk both about what you found with young voters and women.
So young voters are the holdouts here. They're more concerned about Biden's age. They're less likely to think he should be the nominee. We've seen some growing trend in terms of Democrats are beginning to accept that Biden's going to be the nominee. Of course, there was earlier, last year, there was tons of sort of chatter about could there be.
Now, when they say growing trend, and she's also going to refer to it like a settling in that Biden is, you mean you beat the constituency over the head and told them that Joe Biden, you're not switching out Joe Biden, and they have accepted that. That's not the same thing as saying we like Joe Biden and we have accepted that. Two different things here that she's missing in this description of people jumping on board now with Biden being the nominee.
Be someone else, and Democrats were throwing out all kinds of names. I think every Democratic governor in the country was named as a potential replacement. There's sort of a growing awareness among the party that that's not going to happen. I mean, the party's certainly officials and knew that, but voters didn't seem to sort of make peace with that. And now we saw in the poll that they are.
Did you hear
They're
what she
starting to
just
come to
said?
the
Voters. She said the establishment people knew it was Biden. But it took a while for voters to come around. How is that possible in a democracy? How is the tail wagging the dog? That's crazy. But she exactly described it. The establishment already knew what the voters didn't know and didn't want to accept.
To the recognition that Biden will be the nominee.
All right, so that's that video. And that talked about young voters being a holdout. That talked about, people being beaten into submission to accept Joe Biden as a candidate. Now let's go to, which one is this one? Okay, I see which one we're going to go to. Let's go to the next article here because it fits in with his age. And where am I? Is it this one? I think it is this one. Yes. So I'll pause this so it doesn't play. And let's bring up this article. It goes with that snippet about his age being a very large issue here. And I'll read it. It says majority of Biden 2020 voters say Biden is too old to serve effectively. Too old, it should say to serve effectively. That's what the polls show. The polls that has come out, the CBS poll and a couple of other polls have come out over the weekend, yesterday and today. That's what all the news and articles are covering. And it doesn't look good. Like the polls aren't getting better for Biden. I'll read a snippet from here just so to break down the numbers and why he's like the weakest candidate here. He's the weakest candidate in history. I think he's surpassed Jimmy Carter with some of these numbers. Overall, 73% of registered voters polled strongly or somewhat believed Biden is too old to be an effective president, including 56% of Democrats. This is Democrats. So the majority of Democrats say he's too old. This poll is in line with the other surveys conducted showing voters raising concern about Biden's age. Biden is already the oldest serving president in U.S. history at 81. If reelected, he will break his own record of the oldest serving president and would be 86 by the end of his term. Former President Trump, the likely GOP presidential nominee, would be 82 by the end of his term if elected to the White House in November. Despite Trump only being 4 years younger than Biden, voters are less concerned with the former president's age. When asked if Trump is just too old to be an effective president, 42% of registered voters strongly or somewhat agree. 42% versus 72. That is a 30-point difference because people have eyes and they can see. Trump's supporters were also unlikely to describe the former president as being too old for office. Just 14% of those who voted for Trump in 2020 strongly or somewhat agree he was too old to be effective president, to be an effective president, and 18% of those backing him in a hypothetical 2024 election said the same. The poll also found that Trump is leading Biden by 5 percentage points in a hypothetical rematch with 48% of support. And we showed that in a different video. So just building the case as this guy being the weakest candidate. Now we go from here to corporate media. Because when I saw sort of what he was saying in this video, and that's Fareed Zakaria, I think that's how you say his name. It is a scathing analysis of Joe Biden. Let me see which one is it. Here it goes. And let's listen to Fareed talk about Joe Biden's position and him being weak and this not looking good for Joe Biden because of Palestine and other things. But let's listen. This is a corporate shield saying this on CNN.
launched its gruesome terror attack on Israel on October 7th of last year, President Biden made a decision based on conviction and calculation. He announced his complete solidarity with the country. Biden must have calculated that the only way to have any influence on Israel would be to hug it close, show real empathy, send it the arms it needed, and thus earn Israel's trust to shape its response. It was a thought-through strategy, but it has failed almost completely. From the start, the administration urged the Israelis to consider proportionality in their response to Hamas. Israel heard it and went ahead with one of the most extensive bombing campaigns in this
They
century
said, fuck that,
against
US,
a
we're doing what we
population of
want.
about 2.2 million people that by Israel's own estimates contained about 30,000 Hamas militants. By one January estimate, more than half of buildings across Gaza have been damaged or destroyed. The administration counseled Israel against a large ground invasion of Gaza, advising it to take a narrower, targeted approach aimed at eliminating Hamas militants and infrastructure. The Israeli government had lots of long meetings with US officials and then again went ahead with the ground invasion. The Biden team urged a humanitarian pause, but only got a brief one when it was able to get the government of Qatar to broker a hostage exchange. After initial operations wound up, American officials told Israeli officials that what was done in the north of Gaza could not be done to the south. Yet, after telling people to move to the south to get out of harm's way, Israel then proceeded to bomb the south in a manner that President Biden himself admitted is indiscriminate. The U.S. has repeatedly pressured Israel to make greater efforts to protect innocent civilians, but to little avail. Now it has been counseling against an invasion of Rafah, the city nestled close to Egypt, where over 1 million Palestinians have huddled together. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has promised to invade Rafah, whether another hostage deal is made or not. Washington has warned that after the war, there should be no Israeli seizure of land in Gaza and no new Israeli occupation of the territory. The Israeli government's plans are to do both.
So what Fareed is pointing out this thus far, and will continue to point out in the rest of this video, is numerous things that supposedly in public Joe Biden is saying he has this position, and then Netanyahu does the exact opposite. And Fareed is saying Joe Biden has lost his mojo. Joe Biden is not effective. Joe Biden is being outsmarted by Netanyahu. You might be thinking, oh, this is a base position. Is it? Or is this the establishment giving Biden cover for what Israel's doing? Israel's in lockstep with what the United States is okay with. The United States is the one that keeps voting down ceasefires in the UN. But then, so if you turn down ceasefire in the UN, you can't then say I'm against the atrocities that the state of Israel is committing in Gaza, right? So this whole disagreement between Biden and Netanyahu, this is just for show. This is just for show. So Fareed is not as base as you think. He's just playing a different part for the establishment.
The result is that American policy on the Gaza war now appears hapless, ineffective, and immoral. The image of U.S. officials wringing their hands about civilian casualties while providing ever more weapons is grotesque. The image of a president of the United States mumbling words like indiscriminate and over the top to describe Israel's bombings suggests weakness and passivity. Part of the problem is that in trusting the Israeli government, Biden is trusting Bibi Netanyahu, an exceptionally clever politician who...
Here we go again, where the establishment has approved the attacking or the annihilation of, or whatever you need to do, of Netanyahu, not the state. he is the lightning rod to take all sort of critiques from the state of Israel. So again, Fareed is really just playing an establishment role here.
Who knows?
To try to create space between what people are seeing is the state of Israel do and the United States, who supports them, the number one backer.
How to handle American presidents expertly and has done so for decades. This time, Bibi has outsmarted, outmaneuvered, and outplayed Biden. But the problem goes beyond Bibi. Israel is in trauma. The October 7th attack shook the country to the core. The sense of safety that Israel was supposed to confer on its people has been shattered. As a result, many Israelis are sanctioning policies that they will regret deeply. President Biden, as a true friend of Israel, has the credibility to tell them the truth publicly and directly, perhaps in an address to the Israeli Knesset, as foreign policy expert Richard Haas has suggested. About 30,000 people have now died in Gaza, a large portion of them children. About 1 in 4 people are on the brink of famine, and almost all are dependent on food aid. As of late December, the water supply is 7% of what it was before the war. Most of its hospitals no longer function. A visiting Oxford-based surgeon, Dr. Nick Maynard, described the condition at a hospital in Gaza, one of the few that are partially functioning. Quote, "We saw mainly a lot of children coming in with the most appalling injuries, many of whom you knew were going to die, and you couldn't give them pain relief. There was often no morphine. There was nowhere for them to die in dignity. So often they were just literally left lying on the floor of the corner of the emergency department to die." Israel says its goal is to totally destroy Hamas. You can kill Hamas militants, you can uproot its infrastructure, but you cannot destroy Hamas totally because it is really an idea. The idea that armed resistance is the only way Palestinians will get their rights. To defeat this idea, you need a better one. A way to show that nonviolent action and cooperation would lead to better lives for Palestinians and lasting security for both peoples. President Biden should go to Israel and show the country his love for it by speaking these hard truths. He would also show America and the world that he still has the energy, moral clarity, and wisdom to lead.
So when Fareed Z, I'll just call him that, comes out and makes a video like this,
when Hamas launched it,
we know, and another guy, David Ignatius from forget who he writes for, Washington Post maybe, which is the guy that Joe Biden reads. He came out too and saying stuff. When these people come out and say these things, this means that there's about to be a pivot that's happening, or they're foreshadowing a pivot that's going to be happening with the administration. Let's move to the next one, which is an article for read. Because we covered Robert Relch is article on he's against people are saying I won't vote for the lesser of two evil. So now let's go to the sort of the flip side of that, which do I have it? Where do I have it? Okay, here it goes. All right, so let's bring it up here. This one is from In These Times, which is a publication. Let me bring this down and share it. Let's go to this article, and this is the article I posted in the community on YouTube, and it's gotten a ton of likes. I think it's at 400 or 500 at this point. But this is a counter to the earlier article I read where Richard was vote shaming people out of voting third party or staying home because of they don't want to vote for Genocide Joe. And you hear all of the things that have gone wrong, or all the atrocities that have happened in Gaza at the hands of the state of Israel. And you heard Fareed, even this establishment tool named Fareed, come out and say this has been terrible. Terrible atrocities have been happening. And because of that, you have people like this person who wrote this article, and the headline is, "I am done voting for the lesser of two evils. I will not vote for Joe Biden in 2024. So, actually, let me bring this up here. 1 second here. I'm going to read just a snippet from this article, and I'm going to actually switch the screens 1 second here. It's the same headline, but just a different screen because I have it tailored already for me to read. So same headline, I'll put it back up there, but then I'll read the snippet that I have along the side here. So let me read. This is from the article. I don't see how any Muslim or Arab can vote for a man who would rather kill 1 million Palestinian children than get sideways with pro-Israel lobbying groups like the American AIPAC. So already starting out pretty based with this article here. When I was reading it, I was like, wow, this is up my alley. I want to make sure I include this in today's presentation. So let me read on here, and it goes on to say, and if Muslims and Arabs stay home on election day and Trump wins, Democrats will have only themselves to blame. Biden has made himself toxic to key constituents that had previously been guaranteed votes for him. And I must say, the article is saying Arab and Muslim, but it's young people, it's progressives, and it's people of color. Check the numbers. If Democrats are serious about defeating Donald Trump in 2024, they need a new candidate, and fast. That candidate cannot be Vice President Kamala Harris or anyone else who holds a leadership position in this pro-genocide administration. So don't bring me no damn Mayor Pete. Don't bring me no damn Gavin Newsom. No Hakeem Jeffries. That's what this person who wrote this article. And he goes on to say the administration appears to no longer have the support of a large swath of Muslim and Arab Americans. And I must say, progressive young people and people of color. And frankly, I can only assume Biden doesn't want our vote. After all, he is telling us clearly that he doesn't think Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims are fully human. And only humans vote in elections. Love that. So you want to dehumanize us as subhumans? Well, only humans can vote. So I guess your dehumanization is what is the barrier from allowing some people to vote. And I love how they make that point in this article. Now, I'll put these links at the end of the stream. I'll put these links in the description box. They're not there yet, but like I said, I will put them in there. Now let's go here. Now we're gonna go. So Ali Velshi has recently did a episode this past weekend, and it was a couple of things I wanted to cover in there. Wow, I still got a good amount. So let me get through these. I still got a good amount of items to get through. All right, so let's get through the next item, which is Ali Velshi. In this first segment, I want to cover that he covered on his show And the title of this is Uncommitted Vote in Michigan, Doing Biden a Favor by Sounding Alarm on Gaza Policy. Let's listen to this. This is about the people he have on the panel. Let me see if I can, let me just get the timestamp here. So for this Alley Valley, we're going to start at the 3-minute mark. So let me move this forward to 3 minutes right about here. So let's listen to the panel people he has on here describe the situation that Biden is in. Listen.
Well politically calculated, that would be one thing. But you have been hearing from people who are not saying, I'm going to just send a message to the Biden administration now. They're saying, I'm not going to vote for Biden in the coming election. And it's not just Arabs and Muslims. Right. It's progressives. It's young people. It's some black people. It's some Jewish people. So how do you see this going forward? Because none of those groups, while all of their concerns are valid, will think that the world is better under Donald Trump.
Right. And I would encourage those people to vote for Joe Biden.
Listen
in the
to this guy,
election,
what he says here.
But there's a limit to how much far you can get by just hectoring people, right? The fact is that America makes it hard to vote. Right? We don't have, most countries have voting day as an election day, or at least a weekend. Oftentimes in America, you have to stand for hours online, right? So you have to motivate people to vote, and not just
positively.
Vote. An effective campaign has people not going door to door, phone banking, enthusiasm. Joe Biden now cannot go on a college campus and do a rally because people are going to protest about Gaza.
Think about that. Joe Biden cannot go to a college campus because he will be definitely protested against. College campuses is where young people are and progressives. These are his large constituents. How can you campaign and do retail politics if you don't go to where your constituents, where your base is? And he also mentions black churches he can't go to because they get protested. I'm going to rewind it and let him finish the point.
How much far you can get by just hectoring people, right? The fact is that America makes it hard to vote. Right? We don't have, most countries have voting day as an election day, or at least a weekend. Oftentimes in America, you have to stand for hours online, right? So you have to motivate people to vote, and not just vote. An effective campaign has people not going door to door, phone banking, enthusiasm. Joe Biden now cannot go on a college campus and do a rally because people are going to protest about Gaza. That's his base. That he can't go to a black church. This is a big problem. So yes, you can say to folks, listen, at the end of the day, you need to vote for Joe Biden, but Biden has to do his part. Their campaign has to listen to their base voters. I think they have played the politics of this as if
Biden has to do his part. This is not a one-way street. You want the people to come out. There has to be a give and take. And listen to what he further goes on to say.
Has to listen to their base voters. I think they have played the politics of this as if it's a decade or 2 decades ago. Things have changed inside the Democratic Party, and he has to listen to that change.
Dean, when you see, can one be enthusiastic about their support in November in defense of democracy against our descent into autocracy, despite the fact that you may never be able to bring yourself to really like Joe Biden because of his policies? Can you do those things? Can you knock on doors? Can you make phone calls? Can you raise money for a guy you may not be that into because the other
No,
option
you
is really
cannot.
bad?
No,
Look,
you
Donald
cannot.
Trump
And
is
that's
an
your
existential
problem.
threat to the Palestinian people. I say that as a Palestinian American. As we get closer to November, that'll be the argument to certain people in the swing states. Look, I know you didn't like what Biden did in Gaza. Who knows where we'll be in terms of policy? It's not rhetoric now. It's policy changes. In 8 months, things may have changed dramatically. It won't bring back any of the 30,000 who were killed, and 2/3 of them are women and children. But maybe then you can motivate people. Right now, it's about ceasefire. President Biden, he needs to have the fierce urgency of now that he wants a ceasefire. Stop vetoing UN resolutions that call for a ceasefire like we did last week. Of the 15 countries, the UN Security Council, we're the only one to vote no. We are alone now. We have isolated ourselves from our allies on this issue. This is wrong. And, Senator
Understand, the only reason they're even allowing this discourse on corporate media is because of the protest in the street. It's because of the people saying they won't vote for Joe Biden. It's because of the polling. So the pressure that people who are pro-Palestinian is doing is causing even this coverage to be allowed, even this take to be allowed. And don't jump on the gentleman you see on the screens bandwagon too long. He said he's Palestinian. He's Palestinian American, a whitewashed Palestinian American who is basically just a social democrat on the issue and won't go as far as to say he won't vote for Joe Biden, even though he's Palestinian. So no, thank you with these. No.
Van Hollen 2 weeks ago on the floor said there are textbook war crimes going on at the hands of the Netanyahu administration. We should not be backing this at all. We should stop. Permanent ceasefire, the #1 demand of the movement right now, stopping of aid to Netanyahu, at least without conditions, in terms of military aid, and I think accountability for Netanyahu and Hamas. Both committed war crimes. Both should be tried at The Hague and prosecuted and put in jail.
Peter, Joe Biden,
Palestinians saying they should be. That's a Palestinian
has
American.
never really liked Benjamin Netanyahu. He made a bet at the beginning of this war that he would get some currency with him. He'd be able to have some, gas in the tank to influence him, and that has not turned out to be true. In fact, Netanyahu is actively running an election campaign, even though there's no election in Israel, saying that he's the only one who can stand up to Joe Biden. What does Joe?
That is literally what is being said by Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, running effectively a campaign, a genocidal campaign, saying I'm the only one that can stand up to Joe Biden. You can't make this. You can't, in my opinion, make this shit up. Let's go to this next part here. And this is I'm going to just briefly go to this article. This is from Al Jazeera. And this article is titled "Blame Joe Biden for President Trump Come November." And I think I have let me see if I have I think I might have snippets of this article too, but the larger point in this is that the policy that Joe Biden is facilitating, supporting, swallowing his public voice on is the policy in Israel that's going to get him, that's going to deliver a Donald Trump presidency. There's not enough vote shaming to get enough people to come out for you as you're committing a genocide. It's just not, it's not feasible. And we're seeing that with the numbers that are coming out in the polling. So this is an Al Jazeera article. I'm going to go ahead and go to the shortened version that I've already cut what I want to read from the article, but the same headline. And I'll read it here. And it says, Biden and company will be unable to resuscitate his fast eroding prospects among enlightened Americans who are motivated by one defining moral imperative to repudiate through their suffrage the complicit perpetrators of the deliberate wholesale destruction of Palestine and its desperate people. It is too late. The deep damage cannot be undone. Biden is no more interested in a ceasefire than Netanyahu and his rabid evangelical cabinet, which has made it plain that their goal is to obliterate Palestine and plot a second decisive Nakba. Just as lunatic is the suggestion that a muffled Biden is poised to withhold American purse and lethal munition to pressure Israel into bending to its fathom with no protect with will to protect Palestinian civilians and enact his grand geostrategic plans to establish a two-state solution. All of it, every disingenuous ounce of it is a familiar lie. Biden has not been and never will be a peacemaker. He is 100% proof warmonger practiced at backing U.S. invasion of sovereign countries after sovereign country and damn the disastrous human consequences. This article from Al Jazeera is completely destroying Joe Biden. And let's go on. Enlightened Americans won't be fooled again. We're not coming out in November. Some of these progressives, some of these young people, you're not going to be able to get them to come out for Joe Biden in November. You've lost them. Still, Biden and his surrogates believe that money will be their salvation from the genocidal quagmire they're making. After ordering his Queaslings, my apologies, diplomats, at the United Nations to veto any ceasefire resolution, Biden attended a lucrative fundraiser in Los Angeles, co-hosted by the billionaire honorary vice chairman of the Anti-Defamation League, Ham Sabah. I think that's how you say his name. Again, my eyes are getting a little tired, but let's finish this last part. Prior to the up to the 250,000 a plate FIA TT, I don't even know what that is. Biden's gushing superfan described the president's steadfast support of Israel as pristine. Love that word. Yeah, so let's move quickly to the next thing. I'm trying to make sure I fit in all of these little snippets. Let's go to, where am I? Close it. So let's bring up this one. This is Michael Moore. I was hoping I was able to fit this in. There's a few minutes left in the show. Let's see how much of this I can fit in. And before we head out here, this is Michael Moore. Where is his little thing? Okay. Michael Moore says Joe Biden is working against his own reelection. This is just more devastating news from a supporter, because that's who Michael Moore is. He's a supporter. Oops. Let's go back to it this way. He's a supporter, but he's coming on corporate media with these scathing critiques. Let me see if there's a marker here I have for this one. I don't. So let's play some of it, and then shoot. Am I gonna be able to do this? 3 minutes. I don't think. Let's play a little bit. Let's see what I can play, because I still got another article and video. So let's see how much I can play here. This is Michael Moore talking about the dire situation. Just listen.
What is the crime? Because according to my knowledge of history, the enemies of Israel who have been persecuted, the Israelis, the Jewish people of this world have been persecuted for 5,000 years. But for the last 2,000 years, most of the persecution has come from white, European-centric Christians. That's been your enemy. No Palestinian helped to build Auschwitz. No Palestinian stood on the docks of New York City when boatloads of Jewish refugees trying to escape the Holocaust came here to be protected by this country and were turned away at the docks in New York and sent back to Germany to die. No Palestinian did that. No Palestinian ran the Spanish Inquisition. Your enemy is not the Palestinian people. It is white, Christian, European people who have been slaughtering Jews for the last 2,000 years. And let's just call it for what it is. But why are they in an open air prison? Why are 2 million of them in an open air prison?
And that is Michael Moore sort of just breaking down what he's seeing.
What is
this
the crime?
The description. Let me write this. Let me read this. Michael Moore tells Israel to stop. And this is a conservative. I thought this was funny. I got this video. This is a conservative upset at what Michael Moore is saying here. Michael Moore tells Israel to stop fighting Hamas, demands Jews focus on fighting white Christians instead because of the Spanish Inquisition. I would say this guy is kind of dumbing down what the point of what Michael Moore was saying here. Let me see if I have the longer version of Michael Moore speaking here. I may have it. The longer version. 1 second here. Michael. Oh, yeah, I do have it. So let's play a little more. I have the longer version of Michael Moore speaking. So let me bring that up and we're going to play it here. All right, so let me switch screens, play a little bit more of this, and then, man, I'm cutting this real close. But let's play a little bit more of what Michael Moore is saying here, and then I'll be getting out of here pretty soon. All right, so here is Michael Moore, more of the same interview.
Here, those of us who were involved in or helping organize and promote this on Tuesday, the Listen to Michigan campaign, we were hoping to get maybe 10 to 15,000 votes. That was it. A few people, the optimists, thought maybe 30,000. The fact that it was over 100,000 means it was a broad, it wasn't just the 9,000 people in Dearborn or the other Arab cities in Michigan where, we have an Arab American mayor and an Arab American city council, Hamtramck, Michigan. No, this was, of course, yes, it was Muslims and it was Arab Americans, but it was also vast, vast numbers of young people who just said, that's it, I'm out. I'm not going to vote for Trump, but I'm out of this. If this guy is going to continue the war, if he's going to continue to embrace Netanyahu, I will not participate in this. And so you had young people, you had progressives, you had all kinds of Democrats. As I said, the vast majority of Democrats in all the polls are against Biden funding and arming this war. So why wouldn't Biden listen to this? He wouldn't even acknowledge it. And when he won the primary, and then in thanking the people of Michigan, just ignored the 100,000 people. If as Michelle Goldberg said in the New York Times last Friday, if he loses Michigan, he loses the election. Why would you risk that, President Biden? Why? Why are you? This is when you need to be a politician. It's what you should do is the moral thing, which is stop the carpet bombing, stop the slaughter, make sure aid comes in. Don't be dropping aid with parachutes like it was some kind of Looney Tunes cartoon. You've got 2 million people starving to death, and you're dropping a few hundred parachutes. Is that a joke? Is that like the ice cream announcing we're going to have a ceasefire by Monday? This is not funny. This is not a joke. And the young people of Michigan, the people of color in Michigan, Michigan, we have 13, 14 black cities, majority black cities: Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, Benton Harbor, Pontiac. These are African-American cities. They don't support this. But they supported Biden. I support Biden. We voted for Biden. We want to vote for him again. But a lot of people, and this is what I was saying about our friends in the Detroit area who are Palestinian, who have family members who have died in these last almost 5 months. Family members that have been killed in Dearborn, in Detroit, their tax dollars. They helped to fund the slaughter of their grandparents, their cousins, their nieces, their nephews. And I'm just asking anybody who's watching this right now, who's not Arab, not Muslim, if you discovered that the United States, your country, funded and carried out through the production of these arms that are given to Israel, carried out the slaughter of your grandparents, tell me what you would do. Tell me how.
Yeah. That's a question that everybody who's non-Palestinian should be answering, who's not already on the right side. If you're on the right side, you're likely to have already sort of answered that question in your own head to say, if I was in this position, this is how would want an ally to behave, and then you behave accordingly. All right, so what was I just about to go to here? Something else. Oh, here we go. All right, so I put up the wrong one. So let me take this down. Now let's go quickly to this Debbie Dingell video, and then there's one last one. Like I said, I'm trying to squeeze these in. This is just another one. Debbie Dingell just she sounds pitiful. She sounds like this is not looking well. This is only a 2-minute clip. Let's listen.
In Michigan this week, the uncommitted vote, as I just said, got about 13%. 2 delegates are going to the convention this summer. How big of a warning sign do you see this as for President Biden?
So I'm going to answer this very differently, which is Michigan is a purple state, and I've been saying that for a long time. We are a state that frequently votes uncommitted. President Obama got a significant uncommitted vote in 2012, but it's.
You hear multiple times them always say, they always reflect on another time when uncommitted, and they go, President Obama got 10 point something percent, and this time it's 13 point something. Percentages throw you off. Give me the raw number. That 10% they're talking about that Obama got translated into 20,000 people. The 13% plus percent they're talking about now translates into over 100,000. You see how you want the raw number and not the percentage? It throws you off.
It is one issue that needs to be paid attention to. I got a lot of people that are hurting in my district and in the district that I used to represent. The name of their campaign, or the one that I believe was effective, was called Listen to Michigan. They didn't think anybody was hearing the hurt that their families were facing. I have families that have lost 40 members of one family. They are the casework I'm doing for people that are starving, have no food. They want everybody to hear them. They're going to be an important group in November, but there's a lot of other groups that we have to make sure turn out. It's going to be a turnout election.
And there's no doubt about that. But this issue, Congresswoman, as you know, has really gained traction. In fact, 11 other states that are poised to vote have similar protest votes that are being mobilized. What is your message to those voters? And is the president doing enough to reach out to them?
I have had very direct conversations with the president, and I believe those conversations are private. But I think you've seen a change, that the White House has been reaching out more to the Arab American Muslims community, hearing their hurt. I am told that they are doing many things very directly. I pray that we're going to get a temporary ceasefire any minute. I know that they've been working hard for that, and that it leads to a permanent ceasefire. We need a ceasefire. We've lost 12 to 14,000 children. And what Hamas did was a terrorist act, and we want the hostages to come home. I think most Americans are horrified by what Hamas did, but social media is letting a lot of people see the horrific circumstances in Gaza.
And she is realizing there's no way to combat that. That what the visual that people are seeing, this vote blue no matter who, that's not going to suffice. That's not going to suffice to combat what people are seeing. Now let's go to this final thing here, and this is the final receipt I want to cover. This is Ali Velshi, and again, it's a couple of segments I wanted to cover with him.
Had Bush ahead.
This is the other one. This is him, and this is what the other part of the title for today's stream. This is him, and this is the final part. It's called a binary choice. A protest vote is not the answer. This is corporate media panicking about Joe Biden's terrible poll numbers, and now they're going after every inch of the elector. That means the third party and the people that sit at home. Let's listen to this.
The 2000 presidential election between George W. Bush and Al Gore is considered one of the closest elections in American history. It all came down to the state of Florida. On election night, the returns had Bush ahead by such a small margin that state law required a recount. This triggered a month-long series of legal battles, which ended in a highly controversial Bush v. Gore Supreme Court decision. When the recount was stopped, the Florida Secretary of State certified that Bush had won the state by just 5 537 votes. That's a margin of 0.009%. That election, the entire election, was decided by 537 votes. But as Marcela Valdez of the Washington Post points out, historically, elections are decided not only by those who cast votes, but also by those who don't. So there's a case to be made that the 5 million Floridians who were eligible to vote in Florida in the 2000 elections, but chose not to, are really the ones who tipped the scale. There are many reasons why eligible voters stay home on election day. It could be that they just can't be bothered, that their vote, at least in their state, won't matter anyway. Or maybe they can't make it to a ballot box because of work or transportation or illness or any number of reasons. That's valid, because voting access remains an issue. Or maybe they're just missing that spark, lacking the enthusiasm for either candidate. That, in my books, isn't valid, because someone's going to win that election, and it's your responsibility in a democracy to carry.
That's not valid. You staying home because your two choices are genocide or ending democracy, or just genocide, or genocide with a Muslim ban on the side, because those are your options and you're refusing to. That's not good enough, according to this corporate shield. Let's listen to the rest of this, but that's basically what this is. They are afraid. They don't know what to do. Donald Trump, all the charges they brought up on him, not doing anything to him in the polls. He's winning in particular in important parts of some of these court cases, like delaying the Atlanta case. That was looked at as one of the strongest cases and most consequential cases, the one with Fannie Willis, and look what's going on with that. Then the immunity case just got set for trial with the Supreme Court in April, which postpones other cases. So they can't lean on the judicial system. Then you have this genocide going on, and people are saying no way. So you have all these people coming out trying their best, doing all these mental gymnastics, so they can say, yes, he's terribly, and he's supporting a genocide, but still support him. This is Ali Velshi's version of that. So these people who are progressive on corporate media, they do some good, but then when they do this type of shit, they wipe all of the good shit they do away. Let's listen to
Their
Ali.
state won't matter anyway. Or maybe they can't make it to a ballot box because of work or transportation or illness or any number of reasons. That's valid, because voting access remains an issue. Or maybe they're just missing that spark, lacking the enthusiasm for either candidate. That, in my books, isn't valid, because someone's going to win that election, and it's your responsibility in a democracy to carry your weight. And part of that weight is casting an informed vote. And sometimes very enthusiastic, very informed Americans abstain.
Did you notice what he said? He didn't say democracy is just casting your vote. He said you have to cast an informed vote. That is code word for a vote from a propagandized framing, meaning you're informed if you're voting for Joe Biden. You're not informed if you're voting for someone else. That's an informed vote from the corporate media perspective. Let's let him finish.
Abstain from voting in protest to make a point. A protest vote is a vote cast to demonstrate dissatisfaction with the pool of candidates or the current political system at large. Typically, a protest voter might cast their ballot for uncommitted, none of the names shown, or no preference. Other times, they'll cast a ballot for a candidate with a minimal chance of winning, or they'll write in the name of someone who isn't even running.
Those are all your choices.
Or they just won't vote at all. Casting a protest.
These are all your choices in a democracy. You can choose to sit home. You can choose to vote for the guy that probably won't win. You can choose to vote for the guy that lives next door to you if he's running. That's part of a democracy, picking who you want. Nobody has an obligation to vote in a way to prolong a quote unquote democracy. No one has that obligation. Citizens don't have that obligation.
Vote against the shoe-in nominee in a primary is nothing new. It's often an important and useful tool. It shows that you do care about democracy. Doing that in a general election is dangerous.
That's a no-no. Don't do that
in 2024. It could be existentially dangerous because this year is different. This year you have a binary choice between democracy and the expressway to autocracy. When the road splits in two, on the right side, you have a candidate who incited an insurrection at the U.S. Capitol to remain in power after having lost the electoral vote, who has vowed to exact revenge on his political enemies.
This is not a thing. Don't care about that.
Taken and stowed sensitive and classified government documents.
Throwing government documents about an imperialist empire, we don't care.
And for sexually abusing a woman.
Sexually abusing, that's bad.
You have
Fraud,
a
don't
candidate
give a fuck.
who faces 91 felony charges across 4 different criminal trials. One who has pledged to weaponize the Justice Department and local police departments, to launch mass deportations, to ban migrants from certain Muslim countries, to abandon climate initiatives, to roll back protections for the LGBTQ plus community, to make abortion restrictions the law of the entire land, not just in some states. Down that same road on the left side, we see a candidate who has done none of that. He is not a candidate without his.
We just see a candidate on the left side. We have a candidate who's marching to World War III with China and Russia at the same time. On the left side, we have a candidate who blames the Senate parliamentary so that he doesn't have to raise or fight to raise the minimum wage. On the left side, we have a candidate that is deporting migrants more. We have a candidate on the left side who's trying to get rid of asylum. We have a candidate on the left side who says he's going to veto healthcare. We have a candidate on the left side who is funding the military-industrial complex at a rate we've never seen, who's also funding the police state at a rate we've never seen. So what exactly are you talking about, Allie? Both directions are god awful, and people don't have to choose either one of those. They can go their own path and just go straight.
His flaws. He is not a candidate who is unworthy of your valid criticisms for decisions he's made and policies he's enacted. You can and should be angry with how he's.
You should just be angry and talk. Is what he's saying. You should display your anger at his policies, but you should not do that in November. What does that do? Who does that help? But Joe Biden. That doesn't help you, the voter, get anything to have this perspective that Ali Velshi is trying to push.
He's handled certain issues. I certainly am. But refusing your vote is not the answer. Wow. A protest vote is not the answer. Voting for the other guy is not the answer. Casting an uncommitted ballot can be important in a primary. It's a canary in the coal mine, a stark warning to the candidate that all is not well, a message I sincerely hope this candidate hears. And I applaud the people who took their democratic obligation seriously. But that is not the way you prove the point in a general election. In a true participatory democracy.
How is that possible? How is it possible that your tactic can prove a point in a primary, but the same tactic can't prove the same point in another election just on a different day? How is that possible?
Especially in a democracy that
I swear what they do is they hire people who have the ability to double talk, who have the ability to talk you out of your own common sense and enter their illogical circular logic nonsense. That's who they get. People who have the ability to convince you that what you're seeing and hearing is not what you're seeing and hearing.
That is currently holding on by a thread. Your vote is your voice. It is sacred. very hard won. In 2020, that main pillar of our democracy came this close to losing all of its value.
Wow.
Don't take it for granted.
All of what
Use
value?
When you find yourself at the fork in the road on the left might be a bumpy ride. The scenery might be ugly at times. But the road on the right is a dark tunnel headed straight for a dead end.
Wow. That's amazing that he has the stomach to muster up that segment about Joe Biden. Let's see. Here's something from Joe Biden. Let's look at this. What is Joe Biden up to? Oh, let me turn this other video off. Oh, you can't hear this. Only I can hear it. I thought you could hear something. Anyway, let's get back to this pot. Let's bring up this graphic or this headline here. Biden EPA accused of caving to industry pressure on gas-fired power plants. So you know that climate president that you guys been talking about? You know how they use climate to try to get young voters? Look at this part right here. Let me read a little bit of snippet from it. The youth-led Sunrise movement on Friday panned the Biden administration's decision to delay a regulatory crackdown on existing gas-fired power plants by exempting, this is what the Biden administration exempt major polluters from a forthcoming rule aimed at curbing planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. So, you know how they implement things in legislation like the IRA, then they put it out in the future to start? One of those things is about to start, not from the IRA, but one of those things that's supposed to curb, make the climate better, it's supposed to start, and he's delaying the start date. The climate president, Bernie Sanders, is delaying the start date. Sunrise movement that completely threw away flushed your reputation down the toilet over Joe Biden. This article referenced them. Let me get back to the article here, and I'll read it. I'll start again from the top. The youth-led Sunrise movement on Friday panned the Biden administration's decision to delay a regulatory crackdown on existing gas-fired power plants by exempting the major polluters from a forthcoming rule aimed at curbing planet-warming greenhouse gas emissions. E&E News, which first reported the environmental protection move, noted that the delay could push a major part of the president's fight against global warming until after the November election. Wow. It goes on to say, under the new approach, the EPA is still expected to complete a rule in April that could cut greenhouse gases pollution limits from existing coal-fired plants and future natural gas plants. E&E News reported, but the rule coming out in April will no longer include limits for existing gas-fired plants, the country's top generators of electricity. EPA Administrator Michael Reagan said in a statement that splitting the rule would allow the agency to take a new comprehensive approach to cover the entire fleet of natural gas-fired turbines, as well as cover more pollutants, including climate toxins and criteria air pollution. Sounds like a bunch of mumbo jumbo to me. A lot of double talk because you're backpedaling on this this new rule coming up. But that rationale didn't satisfy some climate advocates. The Sunrise Movement said it was disappointed in the decision and accused the administration of caving to pressure from industry lobbyists. So what did the Sunrise Movement do? What are they going to do in November then because of this? You have a person who's doing stuff that is greatly affecting the climate, the thing that is your whole organization, and you're just going to turn over and vote for him in November and push this guy who's going against the very thing that is the core of your organization. Let's continue. Biden is on thin ice with young people, Sunrise Movement added. Make sure the sound is good. I'm almost done here. Quote, he can't throw a bone to us on Monday, let us down on Tuesday, and expect our generation to turn out in the numbers he needs us to in order to win. Don't get us wrong. We applaud the EPA for finalizing the rules regulating harmful local pollutants from these power plants, the group added. These rules are a huge win for environmental justice and will protect frontline communities from toxic air, but we need more. So you applauding them for stuff that hasn't even started. That's the Sunrise Movement. And there is Joe Biden. I mean, you got him doing stuff like this on climate. You got him doing what he's doing in Gaza. That's turning off the young people. Not doing anything enough on student loan debt. That's turning off young people. Then Gaza is also turning off people of color and Black people in particular. Then Gaza is also turning off progressives. Then you got him trying to eliminate asylum with an executive order. That's going to turn off immigration. A guy who already has problems with enthusiasm is just knocking down more enthusiasm in his coalition. And it's just mind-blowing to me that he's doing that. All right. There is the end of the show. It went long. I knew I had a lot of topics. Anytime I don't go live Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I usually try to go live on Sunday or something, but I wasn't able to do it because it's just too many. It's too many stories, and it's still some stories like the Nikki Haley saying something. I had to eliminate that story and a couple of other stories. I'm gonna push back. But yet and still, great stream today. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, on all of the social media, on YouTube, on Instagram. Where else are we on? On Twitch. Also, our website. Make sure you check it out. We always have great stuff on our website for you to see. I'll toss it up for a second here. You can see one of our main mantras: strategize nationally and organize locally. Our story, some of the things we believe in are core. You can join our Patreon list here if you click on that. Along the right side, if you want to go to our social media, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, along the right side, you can click on those. Our clips are here. Oh, this one's age restricted. So, and then at the very bottom, some of our email addresses if you needed to contact us. Over here on the right side on the top, you click RBN merchandise. This is where you go to get that NATO sweater that we talked about. I'll put it at the bottom here. Where is it at? That NATO sweater connection that we talked about. Right here, our RBN merch. So when you click our RBN merch, it takes you to our RBN shop. And this is where you can go to get 11 different logos, different sort of images on different items, tote bags, mugs, shirts, tank tops, sweatshirts, hoodies. This is our most popular one, is our RBN logo. Any of our RBN logo stuff is the most popular. This is the hoodie. The one you see Nick wearing, you see him wearing in stream sometime, and he has a red one. I want to get a green one. Maybe black. Yeah, maybe black. I'm gonna black because that's something more I would wear. The white one looks nice too, but make sure you check out our website so you can check out our merchandise if you're interested in that type of item. Let's read some of our super chats that we have left. My wife decided to help out and go pick up my daughter, so that's the reason why I was able to stay past maybe like 15 minutes than I normally stay. to finish out this stream. But let's read the super chats. And I'll start from the last one we read. So this is how you pronounce the name. Robert Reich. Robert Reich. That's how you pronounce his name. Robert Reich. Then, oops, did I get them all? This is a new one. Oh, my bad. I should have been up here. This is where I started off with Janice, but Janice sent another one. That's why. So I gotta start here. All right. So U.S. worldwide reputation can't recover. Saudi Arabia prevented airspace from being used to attack Yemen, and Pakistan applied to join BRICS. That's a great point. Unemployed scholar. Thank you for that. Here's another super chat from Janice. Shout out to Janice, always showing love. They used Trump thin-skinned president to manufacture consent for a Biden, and that's not a typo because I remember that from last time you used it, presidency. It was all a manipulation to scare partisan hacks and poorly informed into voting for Biden. Third party all the way. I'm voting third party. In California, luckily, all the third party people will be on my ballot, RFK, Cornel West, who I'm not voting for. And then we got Jill Stein and Claudia, who those are the two I'm looking at voting for, will be on my ballot. So this one from DC, Robert Reich. I read that one. Thank you for that, DC. This is a membership, and it's Yantra Mandala, member for 1 month. Welcome. And also from this new member, a super sticker. Thank you also. And DC again, please pull up 45's X post for 45's X post for J6. Oh, you mean Trump. You mean Trump is 45. That's the 45 president. I think I've seen that tweet you're speaking of from that time, because when we covered it, I remember going to his, this is like a year ago. I remember going to his Twitter, and was this a year ago? No, not quite a year ago. Maybe 6 months ago. And we went there to look at some of those last tweets that he tweeted out, to your point. Okay, so this next one, this is the last one from ARJ 1997. Western media tells viewers that Haiti is in a state of emergency due to gang criminals and when the U.S. will intervene. This is another story. I wasn't able to cover Haiti. Some people, some supposed so-called gangs broke some other prisoners out of jail. So that's another story. But when it comes to Haiti, they only report on the atrocities, but U.S. intervention is not needed. Hypocrisy. And I meant to say Palestine. That's what the Palestine flag. That is a great point that you make there. Actually, another super chat came in. Vote Godzilla for president. A true neutral. Thank you for that super chat. That was the last one I'm going to read. Make sure you hit that like button on your way out. We want to get to 800 likes for all of our live streams, if not more. Of course, if we get to more than 800, that's fine and dandy. But 800 is our threshold for 2024 and all of our live streams. I'm going to show you the other shirt. So we also have this one is the completely unserious shirt. You can get this one. This is the NATO one. This is the second most popular thing. This is the thing we always shout out that's scrolling down below. So you can get this NATO shirt or this NATO sweater, and it says, if you look closely, NATO is a terrorist organization. So yeah, you can check this out on our website. Make sure you check it out. All right, that is going to be it for today's show. I'm going to be off tomorrow. Maybe later on in the week, Nick and I will team up to do a Nick and CJ show. Sorry we didn't bring that to you today. Tomorrow, though, Nick at Night Then I'll be back on Wednesday. I'm likely going to have a guest. Maybe I'll reach out to Heartland's Media or Professor Zunkus or Chuck Modi or Misty. I'll reach out to somebody to bring them on. Don't forget to join our Substack. That's if you want to know when we go live. It's scrolling at the bottom there. That's our Substack. And last but not least, as I play an outro video, let's see, what do we have as an outro video? Let's go back to Twitter. Let's see what's trending and what's going on in the news. Is there any new stories that just dropped? Any breaking stories that just dropped here? 25 countries have applied to join BRICS in 2024. That's what that said. Sabby, did you know there was a third-party debate? Free and equal. Yeah, third-party debate, yeah. But not everybody was there, so just so you know, it was Jill and Claudia, probably two of the people that you guys would be that normally would watch this will be talking about. What does this one say? Yeah, look at this is Glenn Greenwald says CNN has a more funeral tone than ever on election night. Dana Bash voice is quivering. CNN tries to hold it together about the ruling. What is this one? Gaslights Michigan. That's an old video. So doesn't look like any breaking, pressing stories, at least not popping up in my feed quite yet. That's just Bernie Sanders pushing vote genocide no matter who. That's what that video is there. I was just seeing to make sure there's nothing else to cover. I think I scrolled through enough to say, yeah, I don't think there's any breaking stories that's popping up in my feed for me to cover thus yet. But let's play this outro video. How long is this video here? Oh, not that one, 44 seconds. This one's a minute. Both of these videos are kind of short. So I'll go to my go-to video, and that is the Zionist DNA or Zionist outlawing DNA in DNA test in Israel. And I'll go to that go-to video to play as an outro here. It seems to be a favorite outro video. So thank you for watching. Hit that like button on your
DNA tests are illegal in Israel.
I'm going to leave you with this video. DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Ask me why. Have a great rest of your Monday.
DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Ask me why.
It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now you might ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel.
I mean, duh. It doesn't take a PhD or an article from a Jewish newspaper to tell you that Caucasians practicing a religion
All right, I had to get back on. This came in late, and it's a very generous super chat, so I want to make sure I shout it out. Jesus loves you, and so do I, CJ. Sorry, I was listening to the show end, so I turned down the volume. So this super chat came in late. Jesus loves you, and so do I, CJ. Free Palestine. Me, myself, and I. And that's a $49.99, $50 super chat. Thank you for that super chat. Very generous of you. And now I'll go back to the video again. Actually, in the comment section, put where you're from. And if you have any other comment, you can include that too, but put your city, your state, and or the country you're in. If you're in a different country, put, I'm in Africa, I'm in Ghana, wherever you're at, put where you're at in the comment that you make, and I'll put it on the screen as this video plays. Let's listen.
DNA tests are illegal in Israel. Ask me why.
It's even illegal in the state of Israel to obtain this. And if you do obtain it, it's illegal to show it and or talk about it. Ladies and gentlemen, my DNA. Now you may ask yourself, why is it illegal to obtain this in the state of Israel? Because it proves through your DNA that Jews around the world have no ancestral ties to the land of Israel.
I mean, duh, it doesn't take a PhD or an article from a Jewish newspaper to tell you that Caucasians practicing a religion aren't native to a place where people have been brown for millennia.
This TikTok caused a storm online, with many debating what his results, which show no trace of being from Palestine or the Middle East, despite being Jewish, mean. Yet, in the state of Israel, getting hold of a genealogical DNA test is highly restricted. Yaakov Aharonov and the Jerusalem Post reported in 2019 that Israel's genetic information law blocks people from buying them from local pharmacies.
I guess boomer Zionists think that if you just throw enough money at troll farms and you don't let people Google 23andMe in Israel, that they'll forget that they're not Middle Eastern. Like, it's not Jesus of Williamsburg, it's Jesus of Nazareth, right? I mean, that's fine. Like, there are dark Jews. There's Jews from Brazil, there's Jews from Ethiopia, and up until the 19th century, everybody was living in Palestine pretty peacefully. Well, I guess until the Nakba, when they got displaced or killed alongside the Muslims and the Christians. I guess even back then, in the middle of the desert, if you have a brown neighbor, I guess property values go down. I don't make the rules, but they sure as hell are racist as So then, if Caucasian Jews don't come from the Middle East, where do they come from? I do not want to be called anti-Semitic, even if I've got Harvard in the background. So I'm just going to let another Ashkenazi geneticist tell you where you come from.
Surprisingly, GPS took us to northeastern Turkey. At first, we did not understand the results, but when we looked at some old books, we found 4 ancient villages named Ishkenaz, Eskenaz, Ashenaz, and Ashkuz, names that may be derived from the word Ashkenaz. This place resides on a hub of trade networks. This is where Silk Roads and other trade routes converge.
That's Aaron Hayek. He's a Jewish geneticist from Johns Hopkins who wanted to figure out where Caucasian Jews come from because, you know, like map out genome, get ahead of diseases. His contact in Israel is Dr. Aurelia Oppenheim. She's a geneticist in the University of Jerusalem, and she runs the anti-aging department. And for a while, the government called both of these two Nazis. Would you like to know why? Because they both figured out where Caucasian Jews come from. Wink, wink. They're 40% Turkish, and newsflash, 40% Mongolian. As if the lactose intolerance didn't give it away. Like, hold on. Do you understand what this means? Like, okay, sure. Like, you don't have any ancestral tie to Israel, but like you don't have yellow fever. You're just dating your own race. Like real talk. What do you see in this picture? Like, is it a pierogi or is it a dumpling? Like, you say gefilte fish, I just see fish balls without the soup. Like, brother!